And magical pug energy, magical pug energy. You've got the magical pug energy, magical pug energy. How you doing, buddy? Today you're a magical pug. Did you know that? You're a mystical magical pug today. Yes, you are. It is snowing outside in a way that I can only describe as mystical. That's the only descriptor for it. Okay, buddy, I'm gonna put you down. Good boy. Okay, down you go, buddy. Yeah, it's just like magical. I went out and did my recording for the day that I have been doing kind of spottily recently, sort of up and down and all around. Been struggling with depression, of course. Went and saw a friend yesterday, so I had a lovely conversation with them about it, and she was very helpful. Hey, Contin, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. But it doesn't change the fact that, like, this place sucks. It's full of dumb people who also suck. Not you guys, though. You're cool. Like, that seems to be the thesis of this channel, eh? Like, I mean, like, some channels tout to be, like, educational, like, and all of that, and, like, I do try to do that kind of thing and try to spread information into the society and all of that, but, like, really, it's a solidarity channel, right? Hey, Watson, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. Like, guys, like, what the fuck is happening? Like, what the fuck is actually happening in this society? Like, it's getting stupider. It's just getting stupider. And there's no other, like, what else do we call it? Like, what else do we call it? Like, I literally have from BNN Bloomberg, personal finance, right? 31% of Canadians don't earn enough to pay their bills. Like, I don't know what people need to start seeing. Like, I don't know what people need to start seeing. And the conservative response of just work harder, just get a job, right? These sorts of things, in the face of literally a third, 30% of the society saying we cannot pay our bills, is completely hysterically inadequate. Not only inadequate, but irresponsible and evil. Like, literally, you're walking up to a pool and there's someone drowning, and all you're willing to do is say, well, that guy should have swam harder. He shouldn't have gotten the pool if he didn't know how to swim. Pfft, what a loser this guy is. And if a lifeguard, like, jumps in and tries to save them, they're all like, classic liberal, right? We should just let people drown. Like, we're at that point. Like, we're at that level. And I don't know what needs to be said. And I don't know why I'm not seeing people say it, like, in public all the time. Like, why is it that there is any panel discussion or anything and people are not pointing out what is obviously the truth, right? Like, 30%. Like, a new survey suggests almost 1/3 of Canadians aren't pulling in enough income to cover basic monthly expenses. 31% of responses to an Ipsos survey conducted for MNP said they don't earn enough to pay their bills and debt payments. And almost half of all respondents, 49%, said they are within $200 of insolvency. It's a bit unnerving. It almost seems unrealistic. I mean, if you live in a dream world, sure. But this is what the survey continues to tell us, that people are concerned and that they're $200 away from not making their financial obligations, said Grant Bazian, president of MNP Limited, in an interview. 2,000 Canadian adults were surveyed by Ipsos from March 9th to 15th, about 1 week after the Bank of Canada raised its main policy rate for the first time since 2018. The central bank ramped up its efforts to rein in inflation last week when it delivered its first half-point hike since 2000 and also announced it would start allowing its balance sheet to shrink later this month. The survey for MNP demonstrates the extent to which Canadians were being squeezed prior to last week's supersized hike. A little more than half of respondents, 52%, said in March they were already feeling the effects of higher rates, according to the release from MNP on Monday. I would imagine now that with the extra rate increase that's already happened, that angst and nervousness has probably picked up even more, said Bazian. The most recent official data from the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy shows 7,392 Canadians filed either for bankruptcy or a proposal to settle debts under this alternate terms in February. That was a 12.6% increase from January and a dip of 1.6% from a year earlier. By comparison, prior to the pandemic taking hold in Canada, there were 11,251 bankruptcy and proposal filings by consumers in February 2020. Bazian said there was most definitely some complacency among Canadians as emergency COVID aid programs shielded households from the economic ravages of the pandemic. He added that the Canada Revenue Agency wasn't as aggressive for a period of time and that banks didn't want to be seen as the bad guy. Bazian acknowledged that the survey is strictly based on sentiments, since Ipsos and MSP aren't analyzing respondents' financial accounts. However, he said that with the overall survey index slipping to the lowest level since it was introduced in 2017, there are worrying signs about how some Canadian households are holding up. Our index is very clear. It's the sentiment of Canada. They're showing that they're more concerned now than ever. Survey respondents who were in the market for a mortgage demonstrated some notable cautiousness in March. Among Canadians who said they're planning to renew their mortgage in the next 12 months, 91% said that they're planning to be more careful about how they spend money, compared to 81% among the broader population. The Bank of Canada's rate hikes ripple through the country's housing markets by pushing up prime rates, which are linked to variable rate mortgages. For Canadians who take out fixed rate mortgages, the bond market was pushing up the cost of borrowing long before the central bank started hiking. I'd like to say the glue that holds all this together was low interest rates. It's been so low for a period that people are structuring their finances around those low interest rates, Bazian said. So when the subsidies and the relief is coming to an end and the grace periods by some of the lending institutions may be coming to an end, coupled with rising interest rates, I think that's where you're getting the nervous tendencies. There's a reason why the OEDC is saying that Canada's economy is going to be the weakest in developed nations for generations, like for decades. We're literally doing nothing to actually build a real economy. So when our ruling structure says the economy, what they mean is the wealth of a billionaire, right? They don't care about the economy because they're illiterate. These guys are walking around saying supply side economics works, right? Like literally writing it into their budget. And so, like, people are your economy. Your economy are people. And if 31% of your economy is saying, yeah, we're not paying our bills, like it's not happening, that means your economy sucks. That means your economy is a failure. It doesn't work, right? So it's just black and white, and it is black and white, right? People are your economy. If your economy is not working for people, it is not working. It doesn't matter how high you put up the magic line. Doesn't matter stonks. None of that. It's completely irrelevant. That's literally a parasitical system designed by psychopathic billionaires to convince you that they matter when they don't, right? Oh, but my investments, the no work that I do, the reward I get for the money that I have, right? I was born with. Like, oh, that's going up, and so all is good, right? It's fictional. It's an imagination, right? 31% of Canadians can't pay their bills. Another 50% say that they're within $200 of insolvency. Our economy is a sham. So when people say, of the solutions that you offer, won't that destroy the economy? The answer is yes. Obviously, we're trying to do that. Like, this economy is a sham. Doesn't work. Yeah, because most people have been conditioned to accept this system as the default one, and there's nothing better. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. Well, and I was thinking today when I was on the walk, I was walking my dog, and I got to thinking, isn't it hilarious how conservatives will say, the problem is government. the problem is government. Government's in the way, and all the problem is government, while simultaneously like denying the impact of institutions, and like they won't say that systemic anything matters or that there are systems. So simultaneously, here's a system that's in the way and we need to get rid of it, but systems don't exist, right? Like it's like there's these hysterical paradoxes that exist within the ethos of our society that and this is another one that like oh, this is natural. Oh yeah, like this is natural, right? This is the natural system, how it's working, everything is natural, nothing we can do about it, right? These outcomes are just natural, you can't prevent them. If you try to prevent them, it'll be a disaster because this is the natural system. But all of the problems that you're experiencing are your fault, and you need to do more to improve your own personal life for yourself, right? So you see how that's a paradox? You see how that contradicts itself, right? Natural system, can't do anything about it, guys. Sorry, this is how it is. Can't do a thing about it. But you need to work harder, and if you don't work harder, then you're a failure, and you're failing everybody around you personally for yourself, right? So when it comes to you, it's all about your energy and what you do and how much effort you put in. But when it comes to actually like having a discussion about the system, natural system, guys, can't do anything about it, right? Can't do anything about it, right? I don't know anything about the Duran, right? And that's fine to have a right-wing following, right? It's fine to have like people on the right. I wish that there were more people on the right actually talking to me, but the reality is that like they can't, because my view is very simple when it comes to the right wing in this period of time, is that they've gone hysterical, like they're deluded, like they're beyond deluded. Like it's like Salem witch trial level. Like we're literally talking about like climate change doesn't exist. Everything is about your own personal energy, right? You have a conversation with a right winger, and eventually there will eventually come a moment with every right winger where they'll say, "Yeah, I got that from my daddy." Right? My daddy gave me 1,000 acres of land. My daddy gave me $10,000. Right? Like that's always there if you're on the right, and I've never seen anything other than that. Mock Major, how you doing? And like, so that's the reason why right wingers don't talk to me, is because eventually we go down the path and I go like, oh, so you got a huge handout from your daddy who got a huge handout from the government, right? Like, so how is that not a government handout? Like, and I've never had a conversation with a right winger that doesn't eventually go there. And if you're going to be that deluded about your own life, if you're going to be that deluded about what has happened in your direct life, where you see money just given to you and your family as innate and good and just and completely reasonable, but money given to literally anyone else as just like despicable and disgusting, I mean, you can't have a conversation with that person. Like, it's just not, you're just not capable of it. And I've never met a right winger who doesn't fall into this category. Like, it's 100%. Like, no exceptions. There's no such thing as the right winger who like crawled up from poverty by his own two hands, because it's not how life is. We live in a structure. We live in a system. The people who are doing well in the system are the people who have support systems around them. And it's a true testament to how degenerate our society is, that the people who have the strongest support systems don't acknowledge them because they're so disgracefully insulting, right? Like, they don't acknowledge their own family, they don't acknowledge their friends, they don't acknowledge their teachers, they don't acknowledge the politicians around them, they don't acknowledge the culture, right? Everything is myself. Like, how arrogant can you get? Right? It's like Kevin Sorbo levels of arrogance. Like you're just like living in this deluded, arrogant, narcissistic, psychopathic fugue state where everything was me. Fuck my dad, fuck my mom, fuck my friends, fuck my family, fuck my teachers, fuck my church, fuck my school, fuck all of that, fuck all of it. Fuck them in a pit and they die. What matters is me. I'm the only thing that matters. And that's the right wing. Like, so just like, yeah, I'm not surprised that people with brains in their heads are listening to that and being like, maybe I'm going to seek out other people. And so here I am. Good to see you, Compton. Like this, and the consequences of this heavy level arrogant delusion are going to be massive, right? There's just going to be like 31% of Canadians can't pay their bills now, and inflation's just going to keep going up. Like what they're doing to interest rates are just going to impoverish more people. Like, they're not confronting the capitalist system. They're not actually doing anything about it. They're not. Nobody is actually saying out loud with words, like at all, that, hey, have you noticed that there's a worthless parasitic class of investors who do no work but steal all the money? Have you noticed that that's the case, right? That these parasites pretend like their economy matters, but it's completely without relevance whatsoever. And you talk to people who have invested into this idea that economy is valuable somehow, and like they sound like they just sound like babbling, like they sound like they have a psychosis, like for real. And I'm really trying to discover how to like pierce through and be like, okay, great, that's all of that language is interesting and all, but it's all predicated on a false reality that doesn't exist, right? Like all of this that you're talking about is just like noise. Doesn't matter at all, right? And people don't like it. People don't care for that when you point out that the whole game is irrelevant, because it is. Like, the entire neoliberal grift is irrelevant. The entire class of investors are irrelevant. If they disappeared, our lives would be better by a lot, by a significant amount. And like, I've noticed the online left, they're just not willing to accept it. They're not willing to accept that that's true. So they're in this like middle ground space where they're taking the other side seriously at all, when it's not serious. Right? I mean, it's serious in regards to the amount of destruction it's gonna put in, because we're investing into this false reality that is completely illusionary and doesn't exist at all, right? The idea that investors have value when they don't, right? And so other societies that have already decided, yeah, investors have no value, like they literally are parasites, like that's who they are and what they do. People like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, like they're parasites, and those societies are actually building economies that are actually working out, that are actually creating benefits for the society. China's employee-owned Huawei paid 9.65 billion dividends to 131,507 current and former staff, an average of $75,000 each. That's what China's up to. Has any company in our parasitical failed society done this? Has anybody even thought to do this? Right? Can you imagine what would happen if 100,000 people in your culture got $75,000 each just for working the job that they work? Like, that's an economy. That's a real economy. Real people got that money, and they're going to turn around, they're going to spend it. Where? In their fucking economy. Right? Instead, what happens in our culture? Right? We take that $9.65 billion, we give it to the worthless parasites, they offshore it, and it's over. And it's over. Like, I'd love to have more conversations with right-wingers, but I find them to be so hysterically disconnected from reality that I don't think I can talk to them nicely anymore. Like, they live as children live, in just like this delusional Santa is real space. And I just honestly, given the last week that I had listening to this climate change shit, I'm not gonna be nice to these people anymore. They want to come talk to me, they're gonna get called children, because that's what they are. Right? They believe in Santa Claus. They believe that Jesus Christ is coming back at any moment. Right? They believe in fairy tales in the first place. So of course they believe in a neoliberal economy that exists. Like, it's unbelievable to me what's experiencing what we're experiencing, and the leftists that are like tolerating it, they're not really leftists, honestly. Like I am to this point, like, just like, no, like they believe in a fiction that's destroying the planet. Like I don't know what we need to say anymore. You got rightists who are denouncing neocons. I mean, the neocons are as psychopathic as it can get. Like, they're the ones that launched the war on terror, right? Like, the new brand of right wingers are at the very least anti-war, right? They got that going for them, but they don't really view it as like a moral thing, right? For them, it's all financial. It's like, we spent a lot of money doing this and it didn't result in anything, right? Or maybe the economy has already been destroyed by the neoliberal policies, like some kind of zombie economy. It is a zombie economy, right? The only way that this economy is able to survive is through massive government bailout, right? And that's a game that ends, right? Because what we're doing is we're taking actual productive energy, right? The productivity of the populace, and we're funneling it into an investor class that's dead, right? That's parasitical. And so if you're constantly taking real work and real productivity, and instead of investing it into your society in order to build infrastructure, doing something important, you funnel it into a worthless investor class, right? Which is what we do, right? That's literally what we're doing right now. Then your real economy eventually collapses, and all that's left is this fake economy, right? So, and that's where we're headed for, and that's what we're already doing. Like, it's small wonder the whole thing is coming apart. Neocons have moved to the liberal camp, at least here in the U.S. Once they move back to the conservative, then right-wingers will support them again. Yeah, I mean, it's just the classic political grift, right? Like, we'll see about the neocons. I mean, they've lost a lot of credibility basically everywhere. Although the mainstream media keeps platforming them, right? Like, instead of, calling for their incarceration, which is what actually should happen. Oh, I know, Mr. Milo. I know. Who am I even talking to, buddy? You want to come up? Say hello. Say hello. Sounds like the Aristocrats joke. I don't know anything about this Duran. I don't know who this is. So I shouldn't talk about it. I just went on a. I'm just upset, man. Like, I'm upset. I'm as upset as I can get because I genuinely don't think we're having real conversations at all. Right? Like, I think what's happening is that a group of children are talking very loudly, and everybody is placating the children instead of saying to them directly, "You're acting like a bunch of fucking children. Fucking grow up." Right? Like, stop pretending like these guys have a point. They don't. They genuinely don't. Their point is reality is fake, and we should just invest everything in fairy tales. Like, that's their entire thing. Like, libertarianism is that, neoliberalism is that, right? Like, and maybe we should, like, walk them through it, but we should no longer tolerate them as intellectuals. They're not. They're not capable of intellectual thinking. Like literally. They're not there. Like, just watch fucking, like, Ben Shapiro and the neo-fascists that he hangs out with, right? Like fucking Matt Walsh literally calls himself a theocratic fascist. Like, these guys are children. They've never grown up. And it's time for us to stop pretending otherwise. It's unbelievable. Like, we're literally just going to baby our way into the apocalypse. It's crazy. The failure of both the NDP and the Liberals in challenging power structure will definitely lead to a CBC majority, then PPC. Well, and on this point, Vince, like, I've got this video. Like, look at this guy. Again, right? What's his name? I forget this guy's name. Joel Harden, right? Again, in the House.
Pilot speaker. It's called the Canada Emergency Recovery Benefit. In the pandemic, we said 9 million Canadians could count on $2,000 a month. But when have we ever had that level of urgency for people with disabilities and people living in poverty? This government cynically asked people with disabilities on ODSP during the pandemic to chase their ODSP worker if they wanted a $100 a month benefit during COVID that lasted for 4 months, and then they took it away because, as the Premier said himself, Speaker, the solution is get a job. Do you have any immunocompromised conditions? Just go get a job. You actually make people live in poverty. You preside over the poverty of 500,000 people on ODSP. You are the person who could make a difference in their lives right now, but you do nothing. You do gimmicks and baubles. And that's why none of them can make eye contact with me now. None of them. Because if I was government, My first order of business would be to help people who are most marginalized get out of poverty, not to make it worse.
Where's this on the campaign trail, man? Like, where's this at all? Anytime I see, like, Horvath on the trail or anything, she just looks like a substitute teacher saying stupid shit. Like, she's talking about the dumbest shit. Like, there's no real anything coming out of the NDP right now, except in the House, right? You watch them in the House and they slay, right? They're, like, pulling out swords and, like, cutting people apart, right? They're, like, eviscerating people in the House. And then they get on the campaign trail and they're just like smiling idiots. Like, oh, hi, hello. Like, fire your campaign managers. All of them. Literally all of them. Like your campaign manager, their assistant, all of their assistants, and all of the staff that worked for you. Fire them. Fire them. They are obviously, like, they are not helping you. In fact, I make the argument that the NDP, like the firms that the NDP have hired to run their campaigns, are actually working for the opposition, right? That's how bad I think it is. Like, the NDP need to actually talk this way. Why are they not? Like, it's staggering to watch. It's stunning. Like, I have to believe it's intentional. I have to. I'm leaving if Ford wins again. I'll miss you. I mean, I'm in this position myself, Vince. Like, I don't know if I can stay in Ontario, right? Like, the rent is too high. That's the bottom line, right? The rent is too damn high. Like, but the reality is that it's starting to get this way everywhere, right? Like, I've literally begun contemplating, like, how bad would homelessness be, actually? Like, send my dog over to my ex's place, right? So that he's safe, he's got a good place to live, and I'll just get a tent and pitch out in front of Doug Ford's house, I guess. Right? Like, I make enough money from this channel and from the work that I do, the 3 jobs that I do, that I bet you I could just keep it going, right? Use, like, a smartphone or something, right? Connect to, like, McDonald's Wi-Fi or something to upload shit, right? And just, like, live my life as a homeless man here in the city of Toronto. Like, I've genuinely begun contemplating this because the rent is so fucking high. And then you look elsewhere and it's, like, not much better. Like, and no one is seriously addressing this obvious major crisis that our society is undergoing. We already have, like, tens of thousands of homeless people. There's 600,000 homeless people in the United States. And it's just a fucking wank. And while there's 600,000 homeless people in the United States, we got to listen to these fucking right-wingers talk about how, well, then you should just work harder. If you vote for people who actively make your society harder to work in while simultaneously saying just work harder, you are evil and childish and should not be taken seriously as a person. If you were voting for people who actually were making things easier and were actually making the society better and then said, oh, you should just work harder, you at least would only be a shitbag. At least that wouldn't be evil, right? At least you would be voting to improve people's lives and make things easier for people, right? While simultaneously being a shitbag, right? But instead you're voting for people who make life harder for people and then tell those people that they just need to work harder, which that's what makes you evil and childish, right? Like, and incidentally, this is how I think we should be talking on national television to these right-wingers. Like, anybody who talks less than this, right? Anyone who's softer than this on these psychopathic, narcissistic children, just don't trust them. Like, I don't trust them at all. I'm literally like, oh, you think that this is an adult you're talking to? Like, you think this is a person who actually has an interesting point to make? Like, literally the guy standing up and saying climate change is not real, we should abandon huge sections of the population, it's everyone else's problem, they just need to work harder while I vote for people to destroy them. That's something that you think should be taken seriously and you should treat them like an adult. No, they are children. Exclusively. Costco pays their employees pretty well. Yeah, Costco does okay. So these lib NDP, too far left, and CPC, PC, or what's it? The liberals are the way to go. Yeah, right. Imagine believing that the person you should vote for is the person who keeps telling you they're going to do stuff and then does fuck all. Le Pen speaking like Bernie, even if it were true, should be seen as smoke and mirrors. Yeah, just like the sock dem coward Sanders. Yeah, like, I mean, I have heard an argument of Bernie Sanders that like he's got to talk that way, because if he goes any harder than that, he will be excluded from the conversation. Like that's how bad it's gotten. That if you go any harder, then yeah, we should just not let people die in the streets, right? Like if you talk about meaningful structural change in any serious way, like this is where we're at. Like I'm balling really hard against these conservatives right now, because for real, this is where we're at. We've got literally 30 to 40% of the society saying people should starve in the streets. Like literally, that's what they're saying. That if you can't sell yourself to a death cult, you should starve in the streets. And that's 30% of the society. Right? We're genuinely actually having a conversation about whether or not people deserve food and shelter. That's genuinely where we're at. Like, and of the people who are arguing we should just abandon huge segments of the population to starvation and homelessness, right? We talk to them like they're serious. And they are serious in regards to their psychopathic nature, but like serious in regards to like that they're adults instead of the children that they actually are. I got to get off that point, man. I've said that like 15 times. I'm upset. I'm upset that our culture is this stupid and this incapable of responding rationally. I still think the final vote will be 55 for Macy, 45 for Le Pen. I got to tell you guys, I'm not at all paying any attention to this French election. You know why? Because it doesn't matter. Like, it just doesn't matter. Like, who cares, right? The French are going to maintain the empire that they have in place. They're not going to do anything about it, right? They're going to continue the exploitation of the African colonies, right? It doesn't matter who they vote. Like, that's like the backbone of their economy, right? France's economy is a parasitical economy, right? It exists almost exclusively off of the backs of the African colonies. That if they were to stop the process of colonizing Africa, right, and their African nations, then the French economy would basically collapse, like and in serious and significant ways. Like it would just not exist. It would not be a thing, right? And that's not going to change. Like vote Macy, vote Le Pen. Who gives a fuck, right? I haven't actually seen either of these guys say anything that I consider to be interesting. Both of them basically look to me to be just want to walk up to the richest guy in the room and just wank him for a while. That's basically it. Maybe one of them will be like, while he's wanking him, will be like, hey, by the way, can we increase benefits by 0.01%, sir? Yeah, good sir, thanks sir. That's essentially what they are, right? And they're all like that. Like there's none of them that are doing anything, right? You got to look at places like Hungary to actually see real leadership, where they're actually looking at their people and saying like, hey, yeah, we don't want you to starve, so we're actually going to do something to actually help you, right? Like, but the classic, like the when you think like the European nations, right? Your Britain, your France, like Germany, Italy, they're all just wanking off the rich and pretending like there's any difference in the political structure. And anytime anybody does come up who's any different, what do? They just get their court system to step on their face. Right? Like, there's a reason why the project is failing. There's a reason. And it's because they don't actually live, we don't live in a democratic space. There's no fucking democracy happening here. Like, what are you fucking talking about? Like, it's all been bought. It's all been co-opted. And until we actually, like, get our heads out of our asses and start treating these psychopaths like they are, like, we're not going to get fucking anywhere. Did they not notice the corporate profit? Yeah, corporate profits skyrocketed in 2021, right? What's going on? Could it be the CRB contributing to society, household economy, bills getting paid, food security? Yeah, I mean, there is that, right? Like, oh, we gave money to people and they were able to buy goods and services. Okay, well, now we're going to stop giving money to people so they won't be able to buy goods and services and our economy will be better, right? Like, it's neoliberal brain rot. Right? And I've talked to people who are like, well, that's not sustainable. And it's like, of course it is. It's completely sustainable. You give people the money, they spend the money for goods and services, the money gets piled into a giant pile underneath someone called an investor, right? A parasite. So you tax all of that back and distribute it back into the populace so they can do what? Buy the goods again. And you keep that cycle going. And just because you have a parasite in the room, like maybe you should think about getting rid of the parasite. That's what's making it unsustainable. That you give the money to people and then it all piles into this corner and the guy goes, "This is mine, I earned it. I earned it. This is mine, I earned it." When he did nothing of the sort. He didn't do anything for it. He was rich in the first place. That's how he earned it. Yeah, they want us to discuss anything but class for sure, Matthias, that's the truth. Meanwhile, LPC and CPC say it's too much spending. Yeah, of course they're going to say that because they work for billionaires. And NDP is silent. Yeah, we hate libs, but give them government 3 years because we're broke and love money. Yeah, pension for Jaggy. Yeah, you're on the money with that, bud. He just wants to cash in his pension. Meanwhile, Andrea and the ONDP executive want to replace her with a centrist instead of Joel. He's too radical, too far left. Yeah, the party's run by. Of course it is. No, of course it's run by neoliberals, right? Like, look, if I have $50 billion, right? Like, $50 billion is an enormous amount of money. Like, it's so enormous that we can't contemplate it. Like, we genuinely cannot put it in our brain space. That's how much money it actually is. And especially when you're dealing with, like, huge segment of your populace are children, right? They can't do basic math or addition, right? They certainly can't imagine what $1 billion actually looks like. And if you've got $1 billion, you could just buy whoever. And so you end up with a guy like Joel Harden, right? And you go, oh, okay, that's great. Like, oh, there's a Joel Harden. He made it through. You know, it does happen, right? The system's not perfect. We can't quell everybody, right? So, but Joel Harden is one of like 150, right? And all you need, right, to maintain power in a political system is the majority, right? And if you can't get the majority, then you just need a tight core, right? Usually about 30% gets it done, and just make sure everybody else is confused and can't organize properly, right? So your strategy is to have your dark heart beating in every establishment you can find, and then just cause chaos, as much chaos as you can all the time, right? You can see that writ large in our foreign policy strategy, right? Like, the actual reason we destroyed Afghanistan and Iraq and all of these places, like, there's oil extraction and there's growing all of the heroin, right? Like, there's all of that. That's absolutely the case. But the real actual reason they do it is literally so that these places cannot develop. That's the stated reason. That we're worried that if they develop, then they'll begin actually communicating with China and Russia in a meaningful way. So we need to destroy these places so that they can never develop. Like, it's a dark and bleak evil, but it's their ethos. It's how they work. That's why it's a death cult, filled with like chaos death knights. Yeah. Meanwhile, $100. That's it. Oh yeah, bud. No. People on ODSP are fucked. You're in the United States. You're making more money on disability in the United States than anybody here in Ontario on ODSP. Like, we are a backwards people. Like, we're backwards. Like, we view money spent on the disabled as wasted money, right? That if a disabled person spends money, it just evaporates and nothing comes of it. But if a rich person takes money and jams it in a hole somewhere, then, oh, that's money well spent. That's invested money. Of course that's invested money. They're an investor after all. We need a party of the working class in the province. The NDP is now trapped under a waste of time for the working class. Yeah, I mean, it's the overwhelming power of capital, right? Like, this is why what has happened is desperately dangerous. And why I actually think, like, the whole political structure is illegitimate, right? Like, it's dead. It's been corrupted. Like, if you have, like, heart cancer and you've got cancer in your heart, right? You can't just cut off a piece of your heart. Like, you're fucking dead. Like, and that's what's happened. And so we can't rely on it anymore. Yeah, they actively silence guys like this, yeah. Speaking of ONDP, did you see the new ads? It's on TV. How to scroll through their press releases under new pre-election blitz. Find the ads. Hard to find the ads. Yeah. No, they suck. They suck at campaigning. Like it's and at this point it's fucking on purpose. You mean like Hill and Knowlton? I don't know who we're talking about. I 100% believe they work for the opposition. Yeah. Basically run by WEF billionaires. Yeah. The status quo works for their real constituents. Why would they change anything? Yeah. Who's saying good evening here? Enemy Colin Tai. Good to see you, man. Don't know if I've ever seen you here before. Oh, hey, Famita. There you go. We did it. Oh, you guys are calling for the number. That's a ton of sevens. That's a ton of sevens. Okay, let's do the number. I just saw 1,000,000 sevens. What do we got? And David Lynch. Oh, by the way, guys, like, share, subscribe, right? Tell people I exist. Hit the bells, hit the whistles, do all the stuff. Oh, did I do the wrong one? Did I do the right
Here
one?
we go for today's number.
You know what? I'm doing it too.
It's
7.
April
Let's go.
18,
Today's a 7 day.
2022.
What do we got? We got like 12 people
10
on 7.
balls.
Right? I know Mock's
Each
on
ball
7. So
has
there's
a
5 of
number.
us on 7.
Numbers
Perfect.
1 through 10.
It's like half the viewership.
Swirl the numbers.
Swirl the numbers. Here we go.
Pick a number.
Pick a number. Here it is. Here it is, guys. It's a 7 for sure.
Today's number is 8.
Fucking 8. Just to make fun of us. Had to be like one off. But Ligandese, you nailed it, dude. Ding, 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 ding. May the energy of David Lynch carry into your life from now until forever. And of course, Nova Scotia Communists coming in with a 3, which we know is half of 8. So you win too. F7, F Lynch. Perfect, bud. Perfect. 7 is close to not 8. I consider that a win. Good for you. Good for you. You know what? Who's to tell you what is or is not victory, right? Yeah, close enough. Man. Viktor Orban in Hungary is someone we should look to. Yeah, at least he's trying to do something for his people. Like, no, Watson, that's how pathetic we are. Like, listen to me. I understand your point. I get it. I hear what you're saying, right? That's how pathetic we are. Honestly, with the Green Party was strong in Canada is Germany. No, I have no faith in the Green Party, right? Like, they're just going to put in another shill. It'll probably be somebody who has like cool funky hair and they'll really talk about like how we need to sell ourselves to a death cult harder for green energy, right? Ugh. So, from the Jacobin, we need public housing, not affordable housing. Home ownership is out of reach for millions in Canada and the US. One well-meaning response to this crisis has been to call for more affordable housing. But we should be demanding more social housing instead. Ownership affordability. This is the conceptual lodestar for the stories we tell ourselves about the housing crisis at the family dinner table, in news media, and in legislatures. The noble losers in this tale are the people who did all the right things, those would-be homeowners born at the wrong time. True, these would-be home buyers were maybe screwed by investors whose speculative housing ventures were aided and abetted by obliging governments, but such investments simply hastened the collective action problem posed by inadequate supply in a deeply privatized market. The whole sad saga is nothing other than the merciless functioning of the market, a story as natural and as changing as the seasons. North American rents continued to soar. This rise has not been confined to popular megacities and has increasingly spread to mid-sized jurisdictions as well. Driven by speculation, meager social housing, and lax regulation, the affordable rental crisis has intensified year over year for 2 decades. With exponential growth in the cost of living coast to coast, few exits present themselves to tenants looking for a way out. So, on the one hand, there is an affordability crisis. There certainly is a crisis in rental affordability. On the other hand, however, this framing misses the forest for the trees. The relative affordability of houses is not simply a byproduct of its location and general levels of supply. Unaffordability is an inevitability when housing is commodified. One of the main barriers to fixing the housing market is the fact that ownership of property is for many people the only insurance against destitution in retirement. It is not surprising that the main issue with housing is thought to be its lack of affordability. Following a real estate marketing campaign in the 1920s, home ownership transformed into what historian Rick Perlstein has called the middle-class birthright, a rite of passage to which Americans and Canadians ascribe both moral virtue and high citizenship. Home buying is the most significant investment most Americans and Canadians will ever make. It is through the purchase of a home that the national dream is achieved, and it's against the home that the good life, retirement, education can be funded. In place of government-led housing efforts, Perlstein writes, putting Americans in homes they own themselves, enjoining more to join their ranks, became a crucial component of the American version of Keynesianism. The prevalence of renting in Canada initially meant that throughout the majority of the last century, the country diverged from the United States in terms of its valuation of home ownership. In the final 3 decades of the 20th century, however, Canada's housing market became, if anything, more insane than that of its southern neighbor. In the past 2 decades alone, the value of the Canadian housing market has increased by 375%. In both countries, ownership is now considered a cornerstone middle-class good, enjoyed by roughly 2/3 of the population. Per capita, Canadian homeowners are ahead of their neighbors to the south by a percentile or two. The political implications of this shift to home ownership are considerable. As Perlstein observed, a social democracy that depended on home ownership was always a social democracy poised to swallow itself. In this scenario, the market is the arbiter of the wealth of the home-owning class. Their stability and prosperity are therefore subject to the market's vagaries and instability. Perlstein goes as far to argue that this class would generally be more interested in preserving home values than extending the circle of social solidarity. The reactionary politics that ensued from the increase in home ownership manifested in racist policies like redlining. These exclusionary policies were the results of fears, all of them myths, that neighborhood integration would sink property values. Today's NIMBYism, not in my backyard, is an expression of similar anxieties. It is the reason that NIMBYs fight densification and affordability housing projects. The policies of home ownership, however odious, has its origin in rational economic anxieties. This is especially true for average homeowners outside wealthy downtown cores. In lieu of strong public pensions, and as a source of wealth for average citizens in a depressive economy, home ownership has offered a perverse response in today's big problems. Indeed, the drive toward home ownership is induced not simply through support of government policies, but by dint of our meager social safety net and floundering economy. Neoliberal governments have been happy to let the home function not just as a place to live, but also as a retirement plan, an alternative to a precarious and often predatory rental market, and a simulation of the consumer wealth effect. What makes solving the present crisis so difficult is how head-spinningly connected everything is. The interdependence of these systems has made it impossible to enact effective reforms without also acting on economic areas. Consequently, the housing crisis is a problem that will not stop. The result, especially in Canada, is ever-increasing market instability. Canada is currently 50% more dependent on housing than the United States was at the height of the last bubble, meaning some kind of collapse, if only a partial one, is likely. The housing crisis presents us with a double bind. The Canadian government is aware that the housing situation is untenable, but lancing the bubble would create a collapse that would be political suicide for any governing party. In the meantime, average people suffer under soaring home prices and rents. If there is a silver lining, though, it's that the madness of the situation, intensified recently by the pandemic, might help expose the defects in the story of home ownership. It's time to recognize that home ownership, a surrogate for the welfare state, is the fig leaf that obscures solutions that give everyone, not just the deserving would-be homeowners who did all the right things, the chance at a decent life. Few ventures have proved as reliably lucrative as property speculation in Canada in the United States. TikTok-adept real estate investors boast big earnings, putting an insouciant sheen on their speculative investment. Real estate investment trusts and fractional ownership, through which rental properties are chopped up into shares, transforming share owners into mini landlords, offer more ways for people, even the unpropertied, to cash in on the crisis. Historically, the housing market was the domain of the small capitalist. In the 2000s, however, as Jamie Shilton writes, housing transformed into a sector dominated by corporate consolidation and more aggressive managerial techniques to reduce costs and increase revenues. Where tenant activists mostly sparred with individual landlords in the past, they now faced off against multinational corporations beholden to shareholders. Landlordism, Shilton points out, has always been a low-margin enterprise. Restrained by tenancy laws and requiring large capital expenditures, housing does not easily yield high returns. Cost-cutting, by neglecting properties, for example, or evictions to bring in wealthier tenants, has long been a strategy to increase profit, embodied in the stereotype of the slumlord. This profitability dilemma, the problem of small profits relative to the size of requisite expenditures, still troubles residential landlords. However, the large scale on which today's pension fund or investment banker landlord operates, with their enormous portfolio of properties, allows them to manage this problem through coordination and economies of scale. Globally, the housing sector attracts a tremendous amount of investment capital. Aided by low interest rates and cheap carrying costs, investors and funds of all kinds have been speculating wildly since the aughts, swallowing an ever larger slice of low supply market. In both Canada and the United States, the result has been a squeeze on two fronts: fewer good jobs due to slackened business investment, and soaring housing and rent prices, both functional as generational touchstones for millennials everywhere. Evidence that something, somewhere, has gone terribly wrong. Even the market's biggest defenders admit the global housing crisis is out of control, especially Canada's homespun iteration. Regular people, many of whom might have been homeowners in another generation, have been entirely priced out of the market. In the face of this crisis, the political classes of both the United States and Canada have been largely silent. Social movements have thus far proved incapable of demanding changes outside of highly localized contexts. The solution on offer are reheated non-solutions, weak tea taxes, and toothless affordability plans. Assessing policy options from what's on offer politically makes it easy to forget that there are real possibilities to consider in tackling the problem. The exceptions that do stick out, Bernie Sanders' home guarantee or Ilhan Omar's Homes for All legislation, distinguish themselves in one important way: foregrounding social housing. Catherine Bauer's seat at the New Deal table rocketed the young urban planner and activist into prominence in 1937. Shocked by the ravages of the Great Depression and inspired by European initiatives abroad, Bauer traveled the United States working with the American Federation of Labor and local unions like the American Federation of Hosiery Workers to organize workers' housing projects and labor-led housing movement. The young activist's 1934 book, Modern Housing, contained her vision for housing: high-quality homes built for use rather than profit, existing outside speculative markets, and affordability for everyone. After traversing the country to enlist the support of union brass, her political clout grew. later earning her the confidence of Franklin D. Roosevelt. The first draft of the nation's entrance into public housing, the 1937 Housing Act, was written by Bauer herself. The Housing Act was a giant step forward, but it was far from perfect. As Edward Goetz famously observed in New Deal Ruins, the program that emerged was importantly compromised in ways that significantly constrained its implementation. Dwellings were forced to conform to rigid costs and financial controls, and thus often limited to the very poor. Without diversity in income levels, most public housing projects, although not all, lacked the social power and financial support necessary to thrive. These projects fell into disrepair, making them easy objects of derision for their political opponents. Bauer made a prescient observation about this possibility in her career. As Gail Redford summarizes, housing programs focused solely on the poor would be politically unpopular and fail to prosper. Bauer instead hoped to enlist a broad spectrum of Americans behind the direct federal support for the kind of housing they wanted for themselves. Government housing arrived in Canada decades after it came to the United States. Pushed by World War I veteran activists, the federal government provided some housing for soldiers returning from the front in 1920. There was also construction on a small number of low-income rentals in the 1930s, but major public housing programs did not occur in the country until after World War II. The first major Canadian public housing project aimed at the suburban working poor was Toronto's Regent Park complex in 1947, followed by Montreal's Habitation's Jean Monk in 1959. Housing provision broadened more systemically in the 1960s, thanks to the steady post-war economic growth of capitalism's golden age and its rapid urbanization, population growth, and labor-left power. A soaring population created much higher demand for rental housing than in the United States, creating a greater likeness between Canada and European countries. As a result, both public and private rentals expanded massively in the 1960s and 70s. Still, significant federal supports bolstered the buying capability of prospective homeowners. Keeping with global trends in the 1970s and 80s, Canadian home ownership increased, leading to reduced middle-class rental demand. Social housing throughout the post-war period, although woefully inadequate to the scale of actual need, enjoyed the status of relative political feasibility. Although the vast majority of federal government assistance in housing would be directed to homeowners, financial institutions, and developers, historian Sean Purdy writes, there was a short political space in the 1940s through the 1960s in which state investment in low-income housing was considered a viable option. In his essay for Where the Other Half Lives, Jason Hacksworth notes that activists and academics perceived Canada's cooperative social housing projects as a success, owing to local tenant management, mixed incomes, and an integration with the surrounding community. These projects countered the perception of public housing as a crime-ridden ghetto. The success of social housing projects is highly reliant on the presence of an income range among residents. Wealthier tenants help subsidize their less wealthy counterparts. Variegated income also helps fight off, as Paul E. Williams writes, segregation, poverty concentration, and often virulent opposition from nearby homeowners. Despite the success... Hold on one second. Milo, what are you freaking out about? What are you freaking out? Are you freaking out because you don't have any peanut butter? Here's some peanut butter break. Peanut butter break. Look at all the peanut butter, dude. Look at all that. Look at all that. Despite the success of Canada's social housing experiment, the 1990s saw this model come under attack. Jean Chrétien's government assumed power in the fall of 1993, amid a punishing recession, and wasted no time catering to the needs of the investor class. Urging fiscal thrift amid the downturn, the administration removed $10 billion a year in transfers to the provinces earmarked for social programs, the most severe cuts ever made. Provincial governments replicated the cuts and kicked social programs down the line to municipalities to figure out for themselves. Rolled into broader attacks on labor and the poor, the backlash to these mounting cuts became unignorable. Volcanic social unrest erupted over the next decade, particularly at the provincial level. Ontario became the site of major public sector strikes, demonstrations, and riots. Activists lobbed Molotov cocktails at the Ontario legislature. The cross-province days of action nearly snowballed into an all-out general strike. During this period, the whole of Canada's welfare state suffered, but the damage inflicted on social housing programs was especially severe. In 1972, local governments built over 30,000 units. In 1998, this number dropped to less than 3,000. Ownership affordability from the 90s to the 2000s marked social housing's exit from public debate. U.S. public housing, already handicapped by its being tailored exclusively for the very poor, fared even worse coming out of the post-war decades. Under President Gerald Ford, a housing voucher program was introduced under Section 8 of the Housing Act, which publicly subsidized tenants in privately owned buildings, a shift that brought higher rents, easier evictions, and more discrimination by landlords. Successive administrations expanded on this shift in housing provision, transferring subsidies from housing supply, public housing and building enticements, to demand, rental assistance. Ronald Reagan slashed billions from both public housing and the voucher system, and stimulated private development of affordable housing through tax credits. The low-income housing tax credit is the source of most U.S. social housing to this day. Aiming to end welfare as we know it, Bill Clinton followed his predecessor's lead. His one-strike-you're-out policy mandated evictions of tenants whose units were sites of crime scenes, and introduced stricter tenant screening. Leveraging the rhetoric of renewal, Clinton's Hope 4 translated the demolition of housing projects, often with insufficient plans to replace them, displaced countless tenants across the country, and shrunk public housing stock. Clinton's reforms enacted the very opposite of what they promised, and resulted in a net loss of social housing. Future administrations failed to meaningfully reverse course in the direction set by these reforms. Of America's 123 million households, only 1%, 1.2 million, now live in social housing. Of Canada's 10 million, only 628,700 live in social or affordable housing. All other tenants, in turn, are forced into the private market. While social housing in Canada and the United States has been hobbled by cuts and privatizations, overseas, Vienna's robust vision of social housing, dating back more than 100 years, lives on. Spurred to action by the rampant poverty created by World War I, and in the teeth of powerful and lawless land barons, the Social Democratic Workers' Party of Austria capitalized on the wave of working-class radicalism and transformed the city into Red Vienna. Major reforms were enacted, including public health and childcare, as well as perhaps one of the world's most durable, affordable housing regimes. By the end of the war, tight rent controls, instituted prior to the Red Vienna period, sharply disincentivized private building, causing land values to fall. The government bought the abandoned property on the cheap or took on the new development itself. In 1922, with the help of a radical labor movement, the party embarked on a titanic effort to build 60,000 publicly owned units, serving over 200,000 people across 400 municipal buildings. The SDAPO soon added tax-financed cooperative and non-profit housing to the mix. They complemented this expansion with ample green space, pools, shared facilities, and communal areas for recreation. The workers and employees who settled here, wrote journalist and poet Heinrich Holich in 1926, apparently spared no expense in order to make their environment as beautiful and as pleasing as possible. Today, 60% of Vienna's residents live in non-market housing. Income requirements aren't restrictive. In 2019, couples whose combined income was as much as $92,000 a year were eligible. Incomes, writer Johnny Ball points out, are not continually assessed, so pay progression throughout a resident's career does not jeopardize their right to remain in public housing. Housing agencies draw on leading architects, artists, or occupants themselves to design the city's accommodations. City planners are careful to incorporate green and recreation spaces into new developments. The system is not without challenges or problems, but its simple philosophical underpinning has helped insulate the city from the global housing crisis. Our policy, Vienna Housing Director Kurt Puschinger recently remarked, is based on the basic statement that housing is a human right. Not only does the large stock of social housing keep most people in high-quality homes, it also exerts downward pressure on rents in the private market. As a percentage of GDP, Austria's public pension investment is one of the world's highest. This dedication to pension provision reduces individual reliance on investments to secure a decent retirement. Breaking the spell. Could social housing enjoy a renaissance in Canada and the United States? Replacing individual and investment fund landlords with public ownership and tenant control is simultaneously unthinkable and a totally obvious response to the 20-odd years of renter profiteering. Pulling off such a seemingly radical scheme on a mass scale appears impossibly daunting. But examples at home and around the world have already furnished us with examples, showing us what a more just housing system must look like. Most of the homeownership ideology is really destructive, politically and socially, says Samuel Steen, whose 2019 book, Capital City, examined gentrification in New York City. But there is something about having more control over the place you live, and you can have that without necessarily being an individual property owner. He points to Mitchell Lama, a popular cooperatively run housing program in New York City known for its tenant management and affordable rents. The success of mixed-income cooperative projects calls to mind the fundamental truth in Catherine Bauer's observation about the success of non-market housing projects. They'll fail to prosper if they do not produce housing we'd all want for ourselves. But alternatives can't be won, nor scaled up on their blueprints alone. In places like Vienna, the expansion of government housing was less a product of technocratic policy debates than about who in society got to choose the course of political action, and with what power. We're a long way from Red Vienna here, no doubt, but we don't want or have to wait until the state has been seized to exact concessions. Waiting for the right moment is, in fact, foolish. The stability of the Keynesian post-war arrangement has evaporated, and the housing sector has transformed. It is now deeply integrated into the web of financial markets. But the new complexities don't make resistance impossible. Intensified by the deadly pandemic, the housing crisis has spurred an increase in political consciousness and action. Rent strikes are threatening investor returns, and tenant activists are physically preventing evictions from being carried out. States, meanwhile, are stepping up in ways that were unmanageable prior to the pandemic. I think the government measures that were put in place to protect people created an expanded constituency of people who are holding on to their housing because of government supports, Stein said. There's a tremendous number of people who are either getting public rent relief during the pandemic who aren't being evicted because of moratoriums. And with all of that looking to expire, there are even more people who see government action as the only thing that can prevent them from being evicted. It may be premature to claim that neoliberalism is over, but austerity appears to be out of vogue. Tell that to Ontario. What's more, the pandemic showed the world that the tremendous wealth in Canada and the United States both can be directed when governments are pushed towards the common good. That'll be necessary, as Paul E. Williams writes, because to fully exit our current disaster and move towards something resembling a fair society, we must do three things: plan, spend, and build. We must become the developer. Marshalling our collective wealth to plan and build via public agencies will help ensure decent dwellings for all. This must entail more than just fair rents. It will require moving away from unaffordable micro-units in condos whose floor plans look like circuit boards, and towards beautiful, well-designed spaces. Urban density may require small living spaces, but that doesn't mean we should solve the problem by making apartments into human filing cabinets. Winning mass social housing that is both desirable and beautiful necessarily involves conceptualizing the home foremost as a place to live, as a human right, not an investment. As much as this idea seems common sense, it requires a tectonic shift in thinking. Winning mass social housing will require more than just sticking it to BlackRock, an easy-to-hate avatar of the present crisis. It will require dismantling the ideology of ownership and the policies that make it so lucrative. The conclusion we can draw from Perlstein's observations is that social welfare rooted in public programs will prove themselves to be more durable than those rooted in an individualized and hazardous housing market. The housing crisis, naturalized by stories that rely on the explanation of affordability to make the problem intelligible, can only be overcome by mobilizing the idea that we must build better housing for everyone. Only then can we begin to disentangle housing from retirement and wealth. Rejecting the idea of mass home ownership doesn't mean reducing our expectations and resigning non-owners to precarity. It means the opposite. It means increasing our expectations by retooling our social understanding of what constitutes housing. Anxieties about retirement and inheritance could be deeply ameliorated by the knowledge that loved ones will have housing provision in the absence of family investments in housing. Housing must be removed from the matrix of the market. The wealth and comfort represented by individual housing assets must be redistributed more equitably through public programs. Formidable opponents, of course, stand in the way: real estate capital, institutional investors, and ownership bias. I don't know what capital does if we succeed in decommodifying huge swaths of urban housing, Stein says. If we close off that option for huge amounts of investors, they are going to put that money into something else. And that could be housing in another country or something else in the same country. I don't know. Solving the crisis thus also demands a more holistic understanding of the problem posed by the housing market. The first step is creating a broad understanding of how private housing is tied to the absence of decent public pensions, and especially in Canada, our ongoing reliance on housing to drive economic growth. The fight for mass social housing, then, is embedded in a bigger question, perhaps the big question, about the kind of world we want to live in. Answering that requires long-term vision. Winning it requires a seismic shift in power, that a daunting task given labor and the left's relative marginality, but the current crisis might contain the possibility, the embryo, for such a project. I mean, it's a nice idea, and it works, obviously. Like, oh, if you just give people housing, right? Charge them for, like, what they need, right? Get rid of the parasite. Like, look, the reality with the housing crisis is that it's the same crisis as every other crisis. That we have inserted a worthless parasite in between our housing and us, right? There's just a worthless parasite there. Like, it's not a mystery. Doesn't take a genius to figure this out. Oh, well, thank you very much, Rob. No, that's why I read it. That is why I read it. Jacobin articles are very powerful. Very good stuff comes out of the Jacobin. Tell people I exist, like, share, subscribe, all the stuff. All the things. And hey, be like Rob, right? Be like Rob. Instead of spending money on beer, spend money on me. Huh? Buy one less beer, give me the money that you were going to spend on that one beer. Buy me a beer instead. Yeah, what are you guys saying? Gonzara Lira apparently has been captured by Azov. He is reporter in Ukraine telling the truth. I haven't really seen anything reputable or trustworthy in regards to what's happening in Ukraine. So that's the reason I haven't been reporting on it, because I haven't really seen much that I'm comfortable or confident to report on. Like, the last major event that I've seen was the fall of Mariupol. But since then, it's been, and I think that's largely because the last little while has been mainly just troop movement, just getting pieces in places, right? And we're in a like real siege warfare moment where like the Ukrainian forces are largely surrounded by Russians, right? Like they can't get supplies in, like that kind of thing. So there's not much to talk about, right? Like sieges can last a long time, and that's essentially what's happening now. Is that it's just a siege. One thing I think we could all agree on is that with social housing, it shouldn't share walls or floors because people wrestling dogs at 3 a.m. sucks. I mean, you'd be amazed at what people can disagree on, Bumble. Yeah, I wonder if large families... Oh, well, who's donating $10? Watson, thank you very much, bud. Ligandis, thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate that. Wow, I didn't realize that I just needed to ask for money. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate that so much. I appreciate that so much. That's very kind of you. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. We've got like, I say it over and over and over again. I think the scariest thing that's happening these days is when I see these panel discussions and the leftists are just not there. They're just not at the table. And so, like, we've got to be supporting leftist voices because they're being actively chased out of the conversation. That, like, literally what we are ending up with are panel discussions between a fascist and a liberal. That's literally what's happening these days. And it's become very dangerous. And what it means is it means that, like, basic common sense solutions, like maybe we should house people, right? Like, just don't get voiced at all. What you end up with instead is you end up with articles like this. Look at me, I'm Investor Bumbleguppy. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it. Hey, and that's $10 for Trotskyism. Any of you Stalinists out there, you want to compete? Well, looks like the Trotskyists are in the lead. That's right. Let's declare who wins the classic battle between Trotsky and Stalin by donations to me. So far, Trotsky's got $10. Yeah, well, $10 every so often. That's not so bad. That's not so bad. How come no one covers the heroic efforts of the Secondees military or militia? Well, here we go. So Cotton asking a real interesting question, and I gotta be honest with you, Cotton. I have no idea who you're talking about. What should I search? What should I look for, bud? Trotskyists are always in the lead. That's funny, bud. But you end up with articles like this. Like this is from the CBC, right? This landlord bought a Toronto area farm 2 years ago, but the tenant has barred him from the property. I'm not going to read the article, obviously, because it's annoying. But essentially, the entire thing is about how a landlord is trying to evict a tenant, and it's taking a while. So, you can't get anything done, right? And there's no question of like, why is it that the tenant won't leave? Oh, well, the tenant won't leave because they'll be homeless, right? Like, that's just not part of the conversation, right? And this is exactly what I'm talking about. So you can have this conversation about like, a landlord bought a Toronto area farm and is trying to evict a tenant, and he can't, and it's been 2 years, right? And so the fascist is basically saying, just throw that person out. Like, just get a cop in there, throw them out. A liberal might be like, okay, so, we should definitely throw them out, but there needs to be, like, jurisprudence and all this, right? But a leftist would basically ask, well, where's that person going to go? Like, the reason why they're not leaving is because they'll be homeless otherwise, right? And there's no conversation about the desperation of the person who's going to be evicted. Like, what's going to happen to them? And this, to me, is the most dangerous part of what's going on in today's society. That instead of it being a conversation that actually seeks to resolve the actual problem, because the problem isn't actually that the landlord can't get access to his property. The problem is that there's a person who's going to be homeless. That's the actual problem, right? But if you don't acknowledge it or bring it up or point it out, right, then you just ignore it. And it's all poor landlord. And let me be official about what my position on this is. Fuck every landlord who exists. Fuck them all. I don't give a shit. This person should live there for the rest of their lives. Fuck you, landlord. Go broke. Sell your property. Fuck you. Go die. Like, that's my position on landlords. Yeah, exactly. He's just weeping because he's extracting people's money slower than he would like. But oddity, that's the point, right? The whole point of the article is that, he can't get his back rent of $11,000. He's not extracting free money for nothing fast enough, right? Like, he's not getting a return on his investment because investors are valuable, right? Yeah, mosquito complains victim is anemic, film at 11. Yes, that's a good way of putting it, Bumbleguppy. And but again, no conversation whatsoever about maybe we should house people like this. Like, if this tenant was saying I can't afford this rent, but there's this housing option over here, so I'll go move into that housing option, right? That'd be a different story. It's, once again, it's the Batman phenomenon, right? That we're all supposed to venerate this psychopathic detached billionaire who spends all his money on weapons to destroy people in poverty, instead of asking the very basic question of, wait a minute, why are these people turning to crime in the first place? Oh, it's because they're living in fucking poverty. They've got no other options or alternatives. So why don't we just take the money that Batman is using to blow these guys up and instead get them housed, get them fed, right? Stabilize their lives. No, not interested. Not interested. I'm a Red Seal journeyman. So, oh wow, we're gonna get some. We're getting some fucking. If John wants a job where I work, where do you work, Watson? Jeez. I mean, I might be needing a job soon enough. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I've got fucking 3 jobs. It's incidentally, update on the monetization of the channel, especially because you guys just collectively gave me what did you all? This ends up being $16, man. I'll take it. I'll fucking take it. But the channel is actually making me $70 this month. First month of monetization. I said on the channel that if the channel made me $50, I would consider that a success, and we've passed that. So I'm actually pretty happy with how this is going. So it's all just keep on keeping on. The album "Kill My Landlord" by The Coup is great. Sounds good already. Sounds good already, bud. Anyway, that's just a little personal update for you guys. We already listened to Joel Harden. You know what? Now's a good time. Let's take a music break. Let's have a music break. Let's have a music break. You know what song I was singing? I was walking around right before. It's magical snow out here. You know the kind of snow that gets on top of everything and it's the type of snow that where you wake up and you wake up on Christmas Day and everything is just nice and light and fluffy. That's what it looks like. It looks like it's December 25th in here. I should be singing Christmas carols and shit right now. These times they are uncertain, of that there is no doubt, and nobody can tell me quite what it's all about. The heartbreak and the loneliness, the chaos and the fear will make even the strongest cry, I wish my ma was here. A young man on a battlefield fights for a rich man's gold. The bullet cracks into his spine, he knows he won't grow old. And as the tears come streaming down, at once his mind goes clear. The war was fought for nothing, he cries, I wish my ma was here. A lively story well in hand, a joke to soothe your soul. And when it came to arguing, she'd forgive and let it go. And when I cried, she held me, told me it's okay, my dear. And as we face these darkened days, I wish my ma was here. And as we march into the streets, as all the righteous do, we'll raise our voices to the skies. They cannot stop the truth. And as we tear their structures down, we'll raise a victory cheer. We made the world a better place, and I wish my ma was here. Yeah, we made the world a better place, and I wish my ma was here. A good opportunity to tell you guys. We got a protest on the 20th. If you're here in Toronto, 11:30, 931 Yonge Street. We're going to shut down the street to protest the treatment of the disabled here. So please, if you can, please come on down. Got asked a question by my niece who's 5 years old. What's the world gonna be like when I'm grown? I looked up at the crimson smoke-filled sky. I thought, what's the harm in telling one more lie? I said, everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? The burning sun won't leave a paper trail. Why work so hard if it's too big to fail? And what's the point of feeding this machine if it won't make the world in our dreams where everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets? You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? And I know one day my maker I will meet, when death's sweet kiss comes to sweep me off my feet. I hope by then we've learned I'd like this place to be better than before, so everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat, and Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice when everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat, and Antarctica is covered in ice. Antarctica is covered in ice. Antarctica is covered in ice. And even now, I still believe that we can do it. I still believe that we can do it. The earth wants us to do it. It created us in the first place. It wants us to be here. It created a garden for us to live in, to grow together, to become what we are today. That the solution to the problem is so so childishly easy. So childishly easy. But we're like a squalling baby in our mother's arms, unable to understand how simple and easy it would be. That all of our crying is really and truly all about losing our toys. That we keep talking about how we need to take personal responsibility and pull ourselves up and all of this, but those who are standing against the very obvious solution are fundamentally those who would like to continue playing with their toys. That these children of the apocalypse are going to be what does us in. Because instead of growing up, listening to the adults in the room and to the earth itself, they just want to keep playing with their toys. And if we want to avoid this catastrophe, if we want to watch the absolute miracle that will be the earth healing itself, then all we have to do is stop. I know, buddy. I know. Here's a good little boy. You're a good boy, do you know that? Simple little guy. Just want to live your life and eat some peanut butter, right? I know, buddy. I know. I'm with you. I'd just like to live my life and eat some peanut butter too, buddy. Good boy, buddy. Today's video was about how do we cope. Because that is really what we are doing now. Coping. That we're not going to avoid negative outcomes. It's just not possible anymore. We've acted too childishly. Well, because I understand where you're coming from, Ligandes. Like, cope has been kind of used by leftists as a, not an accusatory word, but just as a way to, like, it's become like a delusion, right? That, like, you find a way to cope with things that confront your illusionary belief system. But it is what we have to do in regards to climate change. Like, we're not genuinely confronting it. Like, we're not. And I am more or less of the opinion that we should, well, that's a good way to cope, don't you think, Watson? I think that's a good way to cope. Taking action, doing something meaningful, right? Seems to me like a decent way to cope. We are just going to have to cease being as apologetic. I was talking about this earlier, right? Like, I don't know why voices from the right are being taken seriously. Like, their talking points and what they say is an ideology of destruction and abandonment. Like, on the face of it, they argue in favor of it. Like, this kind of terrifying argument for, while simultaneously they say, but we need unity. Like, these hysterical paradoxes that exist. Like, what are we supposed to do? I mean, we should protest. Obviously, we should protest in bigger and bigger and more significant ways. Because the right aggrandize the ideology of the ruling class it either wittingly or unwittingly supports. I actually think that it's even more childish than this, Watson. That I really do think, like, right-wingers literally care only about themselves. That they never grew up to have the capacity of understanding that there are other people in the world. Like, I really do think it's on that kind of a level. That like, it's a natural position for a child, right? That a child, like a 2-year-old is essentially a psychopath. Like, but there's good reason for it, right? They have to like look out for stuff and look out for all of that, right? And most kids will grow out of it, right? Like, because you have to, right? You can't really survive in a social system that has any equality in it if you're constantly alienating everybody around you because you're a psychopath, right? So most people grow out of it. And then there's like basic, educational things like Sesame Street that teach you that sharing is good, right? Like the basic kindergarten level ideas, right? But you look at people like your Ben Shapiro's in the world, right? Who never needed to grow up, right? That were just always having their balls coddled, like always surrounded by their mommies and their daddies and their nannies and all of the rich kids and all of this, right? So they never actually had to grow up, and so they didn't, right? And part of growing up and being an adult is recognizing that everybody else in the world is in the same boat you're in, right? That they're just trying to get by, they're just trying to figure it out, right? And that there are weak people in the world, but that's not an assessment of judgment or their value. It's just what it is, right? That there are people who need assistance. That it's just what reality is. But what we have is we have a huge section of North American populace that I don't think got older than 5. Like, I really think they stopped growing at 5. And we've just kind of allowed these 5-year-olds, these perpetual 5-year-olds, to exist in the society. And then when they stand up and talk, we take them seriously, instead of looking at them and saying, oh, you're just a child that never grew up, right? You just have no like, you literally do not understand. Like, physically, you are incapable of understanding that other people exist in a meaningful capacity. That to these people, others are just NPCs. They're just servants. And that's why the solutions that come out of the right are always things like just sell yourself to the death cult harder, or bootstrap yourself, pull yourself up, because you could always just get a loan from your daddy. You could always just like go, daddy will always bail you out, right? There's always just daddy's money at the end of the day for these kind of adult children. And if you don't want to be a servant, right? Well, what's the solution? Become an owner, right? So there's no even beginning of the conversation that arrangement itself is illegitimate, because that would mean confronting daddy. And if you're a child, right? If you're a child and you rely on daddy, and there's always daddy's money, right? Well, you're never going to meaningfully confront that system, because that would mean confronting daddy, and you're never going to do that if you're a child, right? Daddy is daddy. I need daddy, right? And that's modern day conservatism, if you ask me. It's just a bunch of little children who refuse to even contemplate the idea that maybe daddy was wrong, right? And no, you should just get a job because daddy said so. You should just get you should just get a loan and invest in a business and work harder because daddy says so. And there's just it doesn't exist. The idea that maybe daddy was wrong, right? And then they turn around and they vote with daddy, and daddy is voting for the entrenchment of his own wealth and the destruction of the civil society. And you're just going along with it. So, like, it's worse than indoctrination in my view, right? Like, I genuinely view it as a deep, like, familial, like, human issue that we have allowed an entire generation of people to never grow up and just remain daddy's boys at about the age of 5, right? And they've just never, ever accepted that, there are forces bigger than daddy, right? That there are forces larger than daddy, right? It's like when you're a child, right? Your parents might as well be gods, right? They have this like godly type quality to them. That is how you view your parents when you're a child. And so the idea that there is a force that your parents must subserviate themselves to, the idea that there's something bigger than even your mommy and your daddy, you can't even accept that. That's just not part of the conversation, right? And if somebody shows up and says, hey, there's a force that your parents have to abide by, that they actually have to listen to, you just don't really take it seriously. Like maybe you'll go along with it as like an intellectual process because it doesn't actually matter to you because you're so disconnected from reality. But you don't actually accept it, which is why these conservatives refuse to accept that climate change exists, because they all know who the most powerful person in the world is. It's their daddy. And if you get in trouble, well, just go get help from your daddy, like my daddy would, right? Like this is, in my view, the beating heart of modern conservatism. That like it's just a whole society of people who are still children worshiping their daddies, and I don't see any evidence to show that there's anything shifting or changing that, right? And then these children basically grow up and have children of their own and then abandon them. Like, they're acting exactly as children would, right? That they're having their own kids and then basically just being like, haha, okay, I did it, I got the Chivo, right? Don't need to actually do anything to them, don't need to make serious decisions, don't need to actually support them, right? Like, whatever, we'll burn the place down, doesn't matter. They're just an achievement anyway, right? They're just a checkpoint. It's like fundamentally unserious. It's like why the space is filled up with your Ben Shapiro's and your Jordan Peterson, because that's all they have, right? They're so empty, like they're so bereft of intelligence and empathy and compassion, all of the things that adults cultivate and grow over time, and they're just bereft of it because they're just children that never grew up. Like it's pretty heartbreaking in my view. Like and the hilarious thing is that these are the guys that are walking around saying that it's responsibility, right? Personal responsibility. When these guys have never taken responsibility for anything in their lives. Like, they've always just done what daddy told them to do. Like, they've never meaningfully contributed anything to the society, right? Like, they're just reactionaries, reacting to what's going on around them. And they're reacting exactly as you expect a child to react, right? Just cry about it, deny that it exists, right? Say that it's everybody else's problem, right? Like, do the gaslighting technique that Peterson does, which is, you keep blaming a system that's obviously blameworthy. Well, the problem is actually that you haven't cleaned up your room, right? Which, I mean, everybody has something to clean up, right? Everybody has something to do. So it's an effective gaslighting technique. Like, and that's all it is. That's all Peterson is. He's just an effective gaslighter. Yet right-wing Joe Rogan is a supreme intellectual. Exactly, right? Like, but that's exactly right, Harry. Like, you're looking at a situation where a guy like Joe Rogan is actually considered to be a smart dude. When, I mean, I'm not saying Rogan is stupid, but like, he is what he is, right? Like, he is what he is. And what's funny about a guy like Rogan is that he tells you, like, pretty outright, Yeah, exactly. Lobster hierarchy is completely relatable to human behavior. Exactly. Like, what's annoying about Peterson is like if when he used this lobster analogy, I basically took it for what I assumed that it was meant to be, which is just like an analogy, just like a way in for people to like just like, you know, go in and be like, okay, lobster hierarchy, and so there's this like other thing. Oh, okay, like just as a way to kind of discuss, and like fundamentally, what I read 12 Rules for Life, and I found it to be mainly inoffensive and kind of just like a kick in the pants. I was just like, oh, okay. That's really where I began with Peterson. That it was just like a little kick in the pants where I just went, oh yeah, okay. And I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with that. And in fact, I think that's actually quite helpful, right? There's nothing wrong with reading a book that just gets you out of bed and kicks you in the pants and says, go get them, right? There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But then Peterson starts to pretend like he has any authority outside of this like field of just like telling people to buck up, right? But this is the thing, Famita, is that like people talk about 12 Rules for Life as if it's like this inspirational, like game-changing kind of thing, and I think that's the problem. Yeah, and obviously then he's got the Nazi shit, right? Like postmodern neo-Marxism, yeah, all this shit, right? But this is where he runs afoul completely, right? Like cultural Marxism, right? Like it's all Nazi shit, right? And I've got somebody who I subscribe to on YouTube who like goes through Peterson's work and is like, yeah, this guy's really well read on Nazi shit, and you can tell. He's like, here's something that Peterson wrote in his book Maps of Meaning that's like a direct pull from Goebbels, right? Like Peterson is like fairly well read on Nazi literature, and he rather likes it. Like that, the more you actually look into Peterson and the more you actually like take him seriously as an intellectual, you start to think, okay, well, what are Peterson's intellectual, what are his inspiring teachers? And they're basically Nazis, right? Like, sure, he'll like talk about psychologists because that's his field, but he doesn't really talk that much about psychologists. Like when he actually talks about stuff, he's talking about Nazism more or less. Like this whole authoring your own fate thing, right? That's just Ubermensch shit, right? You're supposed to believe that your energy can overwhelm the energy of all other creatures that have ever existed and do exist, as well as the energy of the entire planet, because you're supposed to be the hero of your own narrative, right? The author of your own fate. His understanding of the history of Marxism about that of a 12-year-old. I mean, yeah. Like, there's a reason he doesn't debate Marxists. There's a reason why he can't. Like, when he debated Zizek, it was obvious. Like, it like, really fucking obvious. Like, anybody who saw that. Like, even if you were I've never seen a Peterson fan even talk about that. Because they know. Like, he embarrassed himself. Pretty badly, frankly. Pretty badly. Like, and Zizek went, like, about as softball as I think I've ever seen anybody go on anybody like that. Like, Peterson came out and, like, did a critique, if you want to call it a critique, of the Communist Manifesto. And, like, Zizek basically ignored it because it wasn't relevant. It like, literally didn't matter. Like, and it was, like, a critique that a 12-year-old... I mean, a 12-year-old, I think that's pretty old, actually. Like... It was like baby's first read of Communist Manifesto. And like Marxism is like this, is like an unfolding procedure, right? So doing a critique of the Communist Manifesto is like not that relevant. It's like doing a critique of the first 12 chapters of Genesis. You know, it's like, okay, but like you understand there's been like a history, right? Like this is like a whole growing thing, right? That debate was hilarious, man. Like it was just like it wasn't really a debate. Like it wasn't at all. Like really, like I don't think Peterson knew what to do. Like really, like I don't think he understood what was happening when it was happening because I don't think he understands the subject matter at all. Well, but that's just it. Like, Zizek was talking about communism and Peterson was talking about something else. Like, yeah, I mean, he read the manifesto when he was 18, right? Like every 18-year-old. Like, but and this is the best they've got, guys. Like, this is it. This is the top level of conservative thinking and conversation. Like, when Peterson and Shapiro get into a room and talk to one another, that's the best they've got. It doesn't get better. Like, and we are being told that these children deserve a seat at the table, and when they have a seat at the table, that the points that they make should be taken seriously and discussed as if they are adults when they're really not. Like, we're dealing with children who just never grew up, and that's like the long and short of it, you know. And there just does come, like when Peterson went on Rogan's podcast and like started talking about climate change the way that he did, I was just like, oh my god, like we're looking at like, and yeah, Charlie Kirk's another one, right? These like, their critique of feminism is girls are icky. Like that's it. Like, that's their critique of feminism, right? And like their conversations surrounding, dude, you're out of peanut butter, buddy. You're out of peanut butter. Like, their conversations, like, really, when you think about it, like the whole like dismissive get a job and all this kind of stuff. Like, hey Rusty, how you doing, bud? Like, it's just bullies, right? It's just like a 5-year-old bully, right? Puffed out chest, right? Like, and for fuck's sake, you've got like Shapiro saying things like, oh well, if people are worried about their about being poor in the neighborhood, they should just sell their house and move. And you're like, sell it to who, Ben? He keeps saying this. He just keeps fucking saying this, and no one is actually pointing out how childish it is. Like, it's like this tacit admission that he doesn't understand economics and he doesn't understand how anything works, right? Just explicitly stated as openly as it can possibly be. And people don't openly deride and mock him for this. Why? Like, why do we respect these people? I don't understand. They don't deserve it at all. Like, even a little. Like... And it's always the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? That, why should I pay for someone else's garbage collection? Well, because if you don't pay for somebody else's garbage collection, then the streets are full of garbage. Well, then we'll fine them. Oh, so you'll pay for doctors, lawyers, or you'll pay for lawyers, and you'll pay for judges, and you'll pay for bailiffs, and you'll pay for people to actually enforce all of this. It'll cost you 3 times as much, and the streets will still be full of garbage. And this is their solution, right? And why? For spite, mainly. Just a bullish sort of spite. Like, no sense that we should actually give a shit. Like, it's shameful who these people are. Like, it's just shameful. And they keep getting platformed, and we keep getting, like, when I look at TikTok, Peterson shows up, right? And he says some banal bullshit about, like, the important thing about living is that you're supposed to breathe. Like brutal. I mean, I think the reason why Peterson is mainly like he's been discredited as an academic even, right? Like his petulant storm out of the university system, and the platforming of his absurdist racist rant. Like, the reason why he's an emotional wreck is because he actually thinks that what he thinks is real, and it's not. Like, it's being confronted. Everybody says this, dude. Everybody says this. I actually do a pretty okay Jordan Peterson impression. And honestly, dude, like, what is what is most annoying in my perspective of Jordan Peterson is that I actually think that I would get on pretty well with him. Right? We have a very similar background. We communicate in a very kind of similar way. I think that we would understand one another pretty quickly. Like we would get on the same page pretty fast. And yet I'm just like, and I know the Jordan Petersons of the world. Like Peterson comes from rural Alberta, right? Like I know these guys. Like I know who they are. I understand why they like Peterson. Right? And they don't like him because of his intellectual phrasing or anything like this. They like him because he reaffirms their own beliefs. Right? I'm old enough to remember when Peterson was a regular guest on the agenda on TVO, and he was relatively normal. Either he's gone totally mad, or he's got on the right-wing grift game, or both. And I mean, I think there is a good part of it is that he just no longer needs to. He no longer feels like he needs to rein in, right? Like now he's backed by independent sources, right? So he doesn't need to rein himself in at all, right? And like this is something that's interesting that's happening in the conservative space, is that you're having conservatives and basically they're standing up and complaining that people are calling them out for being racists. Right? And like for being like small-minded bigots, basically. Like this is the big conservative gripe these days, is that it's an affront to my free speech, right? That I'm being censored and my freedom of speech is being quieted because when I say overtly racist and bigoted and hateful things, people feel as though they should tell us to shut the fuck up. And forget about the fact that that's exactly how free speech works. Right? That if you say something, people respond to you, right? That's how free speech works. And if you don't want to have people shut you down for your bigotry, shut your mouth, right? Like the Chapo boys said something interesting on this point recently, where they said, it just used to be understood that if you were to bring up religion and politics, you're going to have a fight, right? But now you've got this brand and breed of conservative who actually thinks that we can bring up religion and politics, and if people have a fight about it, well, whoa, hey, whoa, whoa, hey, whoa. Like that's how childish they are now, right? Like we're one generation away from people who understood that, yeah, if you talk about religion and politics, you're going to have a fight. And now you've got a group of grown-up children who genuinely think that if they talk, yeah, freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from the consequences of your opinions. That if you say something bigoted, we can say it to you. And the biggest issue that I think that conservatives have is that they're really not used to people of color and women talking back to them. Right? That's it. Yeah, these people want to have to consequence-free freedom. Yeah, it's freedom for me. Right? Like it's my freedom that matters. Like it's the same thing with like the mask shit. Right? Like I want to be free to put you in danger. Like that's really what it is. Like I want to be free to put you in danger. Like no. Like no. Their version of freedom is selfishness. I think Peterson is from the lead generation. I mean, jury's still out on that, but and again, I'll always say it. I'll always say it about the boomers, man. I feel my heart goes out to the boomers because they are the generation that got bombarded with CIA propaganda through film and television before there was even like a contemplation of what that might mean, right? So you just have this like complete and total bombarding of an entire generation of people, And it obviously fucked with them. Like, it obviously fucked with them in massive ways. For God's sake, the marijuana ban, like, are you kidding me? Like, really think about how fucking crazy that is. It's insane that a freedom-loving people, right? The government needs to be out of everything, right? There's too much interference and all this kind of stuff, free market, so on and so forth. And these guys ban a plant while simultaneously smoking a completely different plant, right? Like literally, like this is fine. You're the devil, right? Completely fine, normal. Pregnant women can do this. Absolutely normal. What are you, a loser hippie? Cancer is totally fine. Smoke it in bars, pubs, in fucking maternity wards, right? If you do this in your backyard by yourself, you're literally gonna burn in hell for all of eternity. Like that legitimately is what has happened to the boomer generation. It's insane. It's like categorically, absolutely like crisis level madness. And this ethos has reverberated into everything, right? Like a big thing that made me turn on Peterson, to bring this guy back into the conversation, was like he started talking about communism, right? I literally thought that this guy was just like, buck up, champ. You know, you can do it. What? I understand that things are hard and everything's a bit tough, you know? Life's tough and you gotta, but you know what you gotta think about? You gotta, when things are tough, the thing to do is to look inside of yourself. And when you look inside of yourself and you see that I am a man and I am here to do my best and to pull myself up from the ruins of this absurdist reality that we're all thrown into, and the truth of the matter is that when you're down on your chips, it's only you that can get out and do the thing and change your life. So come on, you can do it. I actually quite valued that. You know, I quite valued that. It was nice to have a cheerleader. It was nice that there was anybody in the world who actually said at all, at any time, you can do it. You can do it. Let's go. I believe in you. You know? Like there is a reason why Peterson is as popular as he is, and it is because he is like probably the only voice in the last 50 years who has actually said to any level on any degree, you can do it and I believe in you. Right? Which I think that that's great. I think that that is great. You can do it. I believe in you. And then this guy starts talking about communism. And instantly, I was like, oh, that sounds like McCarthy shit. Like that sounds like literal McCarthy, like not McCarthyism, like literally McCarthy talking. And like the more I listened to him talk about it, the more I was just like, yeah, here's a guy that basically saw the CIA propaganda when he was a kid, right? Maybe read the Communist Manifesto, right, once, but read it from the perspective of like a capitalist being affronted by it. And and I think that speaks entirely to this like boomer generation. That there was like a consensus that was presented to them as a monolithic force through film, television, newspaper, and radio that just like was pushed forward onto them by a ruling class that had every incentive to do this to them. And it was so overwhelming and so forceful that even our most educated people bought into it. And if you actually like look at any of the claims made, they're insane. Like they're insane. Like they're not subtle little things. They're not minor disagreements. They're absolutely insane claims that only like a hysterical rube could believe. Like 100 million people died in China during Mao's Great Leap Forward. Like you've got to be in hysterics. Like literally like 100 million people, 100 million people, 100 million people, 100 million people. That's the level that needs to exist in your mental space to buy into that idea. Like it just doesn't compute at all. The second you look at any evidence at all. Like literally like all it takes is like a 1-page document in many cases to just be like, oh, like and Yeah, since people realize the leopard-eating face is winning. Just went on our Ontario and our Ontario, Canada. When did they become so pro NDP? I mean, even the Liberals are starting to see that like conservatives are bad, right? Like people are starting to actually like. It's the phenomenon, Vince, of what happens in Canada, right? No one pays attention to politics. Like no one pays any attention to politics till about 6 weeks out from the race, right? Like, remember the last time? Remember the federal election, right? Remember what happened to the numbers, right? The conservatives went, whoa, and the liberals went, whoa. And then everybody like tuned in and like paid attention and it kind of evened back out again. And then everybody got really skittish. Nobody knew where to jump. And so they all were just like, we'll just vote what we did last time, right? Which is exactly what happened, which in my view was astounding. It was absolutely incredible that was the result. Literally everyone just stayed put. Like, but what it revealed, right, is a deep dissatisfaction with the Liberals and a real desire to swing to the right. Like, people wanted to. The polls were indicating it. The polls were showing it. And I shouldn't say just to the right. Like, the NDP had a very similar trajectory, right? That, like, the Conservatives went, whoa, and then the Liberals, and the NDP went, whoa, and the Liberals went, whoa, right? And we're getting closer to the deadline here in Ontario. And your first group of people who start to tune in to how politics actually works are your nerds. So that's us, right? That's the internet people, right? And they're actually taking a look at Doug Ford, and they're seeing, oh, this guy's been just like a total shithead. Like, this guy sucks, right? That the commentary amongst even people on the right is essentially, yeah, he hasn't been doing the greatest job, but Horvath and Del Duca don't look much better. That's the best. That's where they're starting the conversation, right? Which is starting in a place of total weakness. Like it's a complete weak place to start, right? You're literally starting with the concession that your guy sucks, and he does. Ford is easily one of the worst premiers that has ever been in Ontario. Like, and it's not close. Like, I shouldn't say that. It is actually close. It's Ford and Harris, right? The modern conservatives, and then literally everybody else. And so it's a close race between those two guys, but then everybody else, it's not close at all. Right? And people will bring up like Wynne, and I'm like yeah, Wynne had the gas plant scandal for sure. Hey. But you know what Wynne didn't do, right? Whoa. Wynne didn't usher in an era of austerity that's put the province into a complete financial freefall, right? Like, literally, Ford moved forward with a dead religious ideology that fails. Like literally, the statement of Austerian economics is the way to grow an economy is to destroy the economy. What we're going to do is we're going to take the economy, the most stable part of the economy, right? Which is the economy built upon the government, right? So we're going to take the government economy, the most stable part of the economy, and we're going to destroy that. And then from the ruins of this stable economy, it's going to erect a better economy is going to come out of it, because it's going to be based on complete and total chaos. Free market capitalism, right? And the way to reduce costs in the economy is actually to insert worthless middlemen who offer no value whatsoever, but extract the maximum amount of value they can get away with. And that's going to build a strong economy. And this is what Doug Ford has done. The McGuinty-Wynne years created the conditions that made a clown like Doug Ford seem reasonable. I really do think that there was just like a lot of Trumpian energy involved in it. That like the racists and the bigots and the morons were tired of being told that they were stupid when they are, right? Like the children were tired of being called children, and so they said, "We'll show you," right? And voted for just like the lowest possible version of themselves they could find, right? Like Doug Ford is completely exactly the case, right? And like people were looking to depose these liberals for a while because the liberals were neoliberal shills. Like they weren't actively destroying the society the way that Ford was, but like the private partnership of Hydro One was an obvious capitulation, like an obvious sellout, right? But at the same time, like McGuinty and Wynne were like, yeah, climate change exists. We should probably do something about it, right? Like it makes, like they put in 700 different climate change policies. Were every single one of them going to work? No, obviously. They're still liberals after all, right? But like, it's not like they were doing nothing about it the way that Ford is. Right? In fact, Ford is a net negative on the conversation in big and significant ways. Like literally nobody bothers talking to Ontario anymore about climate change or any of these issues whatsoever. Like literally they don't even bother talking to them. Liberalism is the left wing of fascism. Yeah. Well, I mean, they certainly bend the knee, right? Like they certainly capitulate. Wynne tried to do that stunt with that Muslim girl telling a lie that an Asian man attacked her by trying to cut her hijab with scissors. I don't even know about that dude, but that sounds wild to me. That sounds wild to me. Like, look, when you consider, like, Wynne and McGuinty could have capitulated a lot more than they did. That yes, the Hydro One scandal is definitely a scandal. Like and it's inarguable. But the only people who actually care about that are wealthy nerds, right? Because the wealthy nerds know that they're the ones that are going to have to pay that tax, right? Like the poor aren't actually paying that tax. Like the poor aren't really involved in that in real significant ways, right? Like they know that they're going to like, and so when Ford gets elected, like, and Ford is just like the absolute truth of how it works here in Canada, right? We vote for liars. That's what we like. We like liars, and we'll vote. Like, take a look at Justin Trudeau. Like, we vote for the most effective liar, and the most obvious one. Like the more obvious the liar, the more plain it is that they are a liar and that what they're saying is total obvious bullshit. The more enticing we think they are, the more we're interested in them, right? Like it really is like if you were to create like a Star Trek creature out of us and this situation, right? You really would create like an alien race that would literally be like, wow, that guy's, oh man, that's a very effective lie that he just told there. That's very convincing. And the like Picard would be there and be like, so you all know that it's a lie. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, no, he has no intention of doing any of that. Right? Of course it's a lie. Right? So, but you go along with it. And they would be like, oh yeah, of course. Like, look how effective he is. Look how interesting a lie it is, right? It's so believable and well delivered, right? He's not only does he have a straight face, but he's actually confident when he does it, right? Like, if that's the way he lies to us, imagine how he's going to lie to everybody else, right? That's exactly who we want to be the leader of this country, a really effective liar. And I think a lot of it just stems from the fact that, like, white Canadians have a lot to lie about, right? Like, we don't want to talk about truth and reconciliation. We don't want to talk about the history of genocide. We don't want to talk about the class dynamic that exists in the society. Like, we don't want to talk about any of that, right? Like, We want to believe that it's every individual for themselves, right? That there is no such thing as a system, and maybe at best we'll do like a little head tilting, like white knightism, right? Like a little bit of like, oh, I can come and save you from that, right? Don't worry, you poor minorities and you poor people, right? I'm coming to save you, me, the white savior. You know, we've got a lot to lie about. Like so what do? We vote for the most effective one, right? And I mean, prove me wrong. Like, tell me I'm wrong. Like, who in the last 20 years has been elected on a platform and actually done the platform, right? Is there even one? Is there even one example of one politician who has been elected on a platform and then actually did the platform that they ran on? Right? Like Stephen Harper didn't. Like Stephen Harper said, we're going to cut the deficit, we're going to balance the budget, we're going to do all this kind of stuff. He fucking ran a larger budget than Trudeau did. Like, is there a single example of a Canadian politician running on a platform and then enacting that platform, or even trying to enact the platform? Like Justin Trudeau, first time he's elected, electoral reform, where is it? Nah. Right? Doug Ford, literally, like, buck a beer, lower your hydro costs. No, I'm not going to get rid of the basic income pilot. It's all a farce. It's all a total farce. So, like, this is why I take a look at Pierre Poilievre and I'm quite concerned about him. Right? Because he's an extremely effective liar. Like, he's very good at it. Like, and I don't know if he actually believes in what he says, right? I don't know if he believes what he says, but he if he does, that's actually kind of scarier, right? Because, like, if he believes what he says, then not only is he a grifter, but, like, he thinks he's not. Well, I mean, grinning, the whole system was built. Look, the system is not designed to look at the electorate, right? Say, electorate, what would you like to see happen? And the electorate goes, we would like to see there no be homeless people, please. No homeless people, you say? Oh, you want stable housing? Oh, okay. Medicare. Oh, okay. Interesting. Well, I'll make a list, and then I'll get together with all my buddies, and then we'll make it happen, chaps. Right? And then they all get together and say, well, my constituents and my constituents and my constituents. Oh, very good. Well, let us do it and draw up a plan and, like, enact it. Like, that's literally not what the system is designed to do. Right? What the system is designed to do is the prime minister walks up to the queen, right? And the queen says, I need more gold. Open a mine there so I can get more gold to fund our military to enact our slavery and genocide regime. And the prime minister goes, yes, ma'am, and walks to his party and goes, the queen needs a gold mine. Right? Well, how can we get the people of Parkersburg to actually go along with this mine? Tell them it will give them jobs, and the wealth will trickle into the economy. Right? And so they'll open up a mine, and then the mine is, of course, privately owned. And who's it privately owned by? Like the cousin of the prime minister. And he runs the mine. People go work in the mine, enticed there by high wages, right, which they pay. But then, of course, they own all the land around the mine, and they own the company store, right? And so they charge high prices, and so all of the wealth that was generated through that process just goes back to the cousin anyway, because he fucking owned everything, right? And that's how it works. And if the people grumble, right? If the people go, oh, I don't care for that, oh, right? Then they go, oh, I'm going to vote for a different face. I vote for this guy's face. Your face will do it. And then what does that face do? I would like a mine. Yes, your majesty. Yes, your majesty. And then they open the mine, and then it's that guy's cousin that owns the mine. Right? That's how the system was structured. It's not structured to listen to the populace and do what the populace does. It's there to disseminate edicts from the owners. That's the whole point of the structure of the piece, right? And how do you know that this is the truth? We literally didn't have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms until the 70s, like in the 80s. Like we literally did not have a document that granted us rights at all in Canada until the 70s. And the document we ended up with, I give it a 6 out of 10, right? Like we literally didn't say people should have food and shelter. Like that loses you 4 points right off the hop. Like I would argue that food and shelter is a key component of security, which that's what's said in it. But we all know what's meant with security, right? White people need to be able to keep their property safe from their slaves. Like that's what that really means, right? And and so the entire structure of our society is one of capitulation and compliance and obedience, right? Like it doesn't respond to, like, for all of the like conversation about oh, we need to have virulent debate and we need to actually have conversations and we need to have, well, okay, but the society doesn't actually work that way, right? The way the society works is that the owners create an edict. They come up with an idea that they want, and their ideas are always something like, I need a mine, I need to enslave this population, we got to destroy these guys over here. And then it's the role of the elected officials to find a way to enact it. And that's how it actually works. And has always worked. It's never been. And this what bothers me about, like, I read this Jacobin article, right? And it's driving me fucking crazy that these guys, these really intelligent, well-read guys, are well-argued and well-meaning, certainly, they keep coming to the solution part, and the solution is always ask your representative for permission. It's always that. Like, we need to do this thing to get our representative to do a thing. And I'm always like, it doesn't work that way. Like, it literally doesn't work that way. Like, the only time representatives actually do what you say is if you, the people, if we, the people, become more powerful and threatening than the owners. It's the only time they've ever capitulated anything to the working class and to the and to the owned class, to the proletariat, right? Is if the proletariat actually organizes in such a way to be more threatening. And like, so and the ruling class is fairly well aware of this. And like, that's why their solution, right, isn't capitulation, isn't to make things easier for us. It's to actually make things more difficult, because their goal right now is exhaustion. That's the goal. Just make sure that everyone is so exhausted that they don't even have the energy to begin fighting back, right? Because if they were to actually attempt to negotiate on equal terms at all, well, that's a losing game for them, right? Not that I think that they're even capable of the empathy required or the compassion required for these sorts of things. Yeah, Queen is code for Bezos. And this is how this is manifesting, guys. Do you work longer hours than a medieval peasant? Studying 13th century work habits reveals a surprising contrast with American workers of today. Incredible as it may sound, the average modern American puts in longer hours at his or her work than the average medieval peasant. While many people feel pressure to work long hours, even the hardest hit victim of the gigs economy might assume that they at least don't work as hard as a medieval peasant. But that assumption would be wrong. Juliet Score, a professor of sociology at Boston College, explained in her book, The Overworked American, The Unexpected Decline of Leisure, that the average American in 1987 was working about 1,949 hours annually, while an adult male peasant in the 13th century England racked up approximately 1,620 hours yearly. The average number of hours worked has gone down a little since the late 1980s. According to the latest figures, on average, A full-time employee in the United States works 1,801 hours per year, or 37.5 hours per week. But that's still more than their medieval counterparts. Economists of the last century have turned out to be quite wrong about the direction work was taking. According to Business Insider, John Maynard Keynes, one of the founders of modern economics, made a famous prediction that by 2030, advanced societies would be wealthy enough that leisure time rather than work would characterize national lifestyles. So far, that forecast is not looking good. I mean, to interject, I would say it's because we're not an advanced society. We just pretend to be one. If anything, the COVID-19 pandemic made people work more. They might not have been putting in their hours in an office, but they were trapped by their jobs nonetheless. The Economist reported on research showing that in April and May of 2020, the average working day was 30 minutes longer than in January and February, which was before the lockdown. In recent articles, the work culture at online startup Oxymedia has drawn widespread disapproval. One 24-year-old producer ended up in the hospital after 2 weeks' worth of 18-hour days that she felt pressured to perform. She told CNN she feared letting her boss down. The producer eventually left her job after a 6-week outpatient program created for extremely depressed people to get better. The United States is the only advanced country with no national vacation policy. Again, the United States is not an advanced country. It just pretends to be. Many American workers must keep on working through the public holidays, and vacation days often go unused, said Business Insider. But how could things have possibly been better in medieval times? Before capitalism, most people did not work very long hours at all, wrote Score in her book. Consider a typical working day in the medieval period. It stretched from dawn till dusk, 16 hours in summer, 8 in winter, but as Bishop Pilkington has noted, work was intermittent. Come to a halt for breakfast, lunch, the customary afternoon nap, and dinner. Depending on time and place, there was also mid-morning and mid-afternoon refreshment breaks. These rest periods were the traditional rights of laborers, which they enjoyed even during peak harvest times. And even during slack periods, which accounted for a large part of the year, adherence to regular working hours was not usual. According to Oxford professor James E. Thorold Rogers, the medieval worker did not labor for more than 8 hours in a single day. Plowing and harvesting were back-breaking toil, no doubt, but the peasant enjoyed anywhere from 8 weeks to half the year off. The Catholic Church, mindful of keeping a population from rebelling, enforced frequent mandatory holidays. One of the priorities of Thomas Cromwell, architect of the Protestant Reformation, was getting rid of some of England's feast days and other customary days away from labor. In England, before Cromwell, weddings, wakes, and births might mean a week off to celebrate. And when wandering jugglers or sporting events came to town, the peasants expected time off for entertainment, according to Business Insider. There were labor-free Sundays, and when the plowing and harvesting seasons were over, the peasant got time to rest, too. In fact, Score found that during periods of particularly high wages, such as the 14th century England, peasants might put in no more than 150 days a year. All told, holiday leisure time in medieval England took up probably about 1/3 of the year, she wrote in her book. And the English were apparently working harder than their neighbors. The Ancien regime in France is reported to have guaranteed 52 Sundays and 90 rest days as well as 38 holidays. In Spain, travelers noted that holidays totaled 5 months per year. The modern American, after a year on the job, gets an average of 8 vacation days annually. But could this be changing? No. It looks like the pandemic has created new thoughts about work. Labor experts say that people who worked grindingly long hours, whether for low pay or not, are reluctant to return to that existence after lockdown. More people are quitting their jobs during any time in the last 20 years, says the Bureau of Labor Statistics. One woman who quit her job told Fortune, "Something just kind of broke when I thought about how hard I had been working for $32,000 a year." Maybe we're finally going to reach parity with our 14th century ancestors. And this article doesn't touch on it. Like, my degree is in theater. Do you know what happened? Do you know what happens when you have a peasantry that actually has time and money on their hands, right? You create a golden age. You know, Shakespeare, I'm sure, just a little, not a very well-known actor, right? Or a person in our culture, you know, William Shakespeare, right? Well, he's able to exist as a cultural force and as a cultural practitioner because you have a peasantry with time and money. And so we hold up this idea of like, here's a guy, this is the greatest. Well, the reason he exists at all is because there's a peasantry with time and money. Like, it doesn't take a genius to figure this out. Feudalism was less productive than capitalism. We gave up a lot of the better things in feudalism. But civil rights wouldn't have been possible. You had to obey the Lord and King. I mean, because you can disobey the capitalists here, right? Like, look, I view how the capitalists operate, right, to be the same as how the lords and kings of feudalism operated. It's just that instead of it being religion, instead of it being like, let's bamboozle the populace with superstitious stories of religion or antiquity, right? They use other methods. Identity politics is like this, right? But it's the same thing and it's the same goal, right? Get the populace focused on things that aren't that important to our power, right? Like, maybe they are important in like a cultural sort of a sense, right? But they're not a threat to our power. And as long as the populace is having conversations about the nature of God, right, or what does it mean to be like what does it mean to be a man or a woman or any of this kind of stuff, right? You can't disobey within the set of civil rights. The king, lords, priest had dictatorial power over all the serfs. I mean, that's only true to a degree, right? Like, I would argue that you can't, actually, because all the capitalists care about is that you work for them, right? Like, how do you disobey the system of capital in this society, right? Because that's all the capitalists actually care about, right? Work for us. You do all the work, we do none of the work. They don't care about anything else, right? So when you get into the concept of disobedience or disobeying in this manner, right? How do you? You can't. You literally can't. Like, you have to work for the system of capital and for the capitalists. And in terms of like what example could be given for a situation like if you attempt to quote unquote disobey the capitalists, they just replace you, right? Like they don't have the need. And if the capitalist wants to go and do something evil and nefarious, he will. I mean, look at the fucking Epstein's Island. Like, there's no like we make a lot of hay about how much we have in terms of our civil rights or any of that kind of stuff, but like, it's all illusionary, right? It's all illusionary. It's just like another iteration. It's just another layer of separation. Capitalism and the Industrial Revolution destroyed a lot of jobs around the world because instead of making things, machines would make them. Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but under feudalism, you could get killed for speaking out against the king. I mean, you take a look at Julian Assange, right? You can speak out against the capitalists. I mean, you take a look at what's his name, killed for speaking out against the king. I mean, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, like. You can speak out against capitalists because of civil rights. I mean, you can try. You can try. Like, the American capitalism has the largest prison system in the world, 20% of the prison population. Like, it's an enormous enormous evil that exists in the world just on the face of it. Like you don't need to go any deeper than just stating like America has the largest prison system in the world, 20% of the world's prison population, right? Like that obviously that's evil. Like and again, I kind of look at it and I'm like, what, you think like you think we're not killing people who are speaking out against the king? Like I can speak out against the king because what I am doing is fundamentally just like grumbling in my cups in a pub, right? Which no king in feudal anywhere would care about, right? Who gives a shit if the peasants are in the pub grumbling, right? Let them, right? It's when they form up and actually do shit, right? That's when kings will start to fuck with you, right? Because you're actually presenting a threat in the power structure, right? Like even in the fucking like Roman Republic, like they don't give a shit if the slaves were grumbling, right? Oh, slaves are grumbling. Okay, whoop-de fuck, right? They only care if the slaves get together and pick up some weapons and fight, right? And even then, like I suspect that the Romans were more or less of the opinion like, oh, good, something to do. Like we're killing our people too. Like we're killing our dissidents as well. And like right now we're going through a pretty major purge. Like we're in a pretty major McCarthy moment right now, right? Like Chris Hedges has been removed from YouTube. I'm seeing almost every other day now. There's a story of someone being banned from something, right? Like that the mode now is censorship, right? It's a new era of McCarthyism. You got people like Lee Camp, Abby Martin, Oliver Stone. Oliver Stone has had lots of his stuff removed, right? So like, again, like I think that what capitalism does is it just shakes up the monarchical pot, right? Yeah, we get the veneer of human rights, but they kill you if they know they can get away with it and won't get flack. Yeah. And the only time we ever get any kind of something resembling justice is through rebellion. Like the George Floyd murder, right? There's absolutely no way that cop would have faced any repercussion whatsoever if not for the riots and rebellion that followed. Because that's the way the structure works. Anybody that has any power to influence opinion is not allowed to speak. Yeah, they let people like me that nobody listens to. Yeah. Like, why spend any capital giving any credence to someone who doesn't have any weight, right? Like you think about somebody like Martin Luther King. Like, if Martin Luther King was just a preacher who stood up and did some speeches, right? No one would give a shit. And in fact, if you look back on how people viewed Martin Luther King when that's what he was doing, they actually thought that he was an interesting person. They gave him a lot of credence. They gave him a lot of oxygen. They let him speak because he was just a preacher in a room. He was just grumbling, right? When did he become a hated figure in America? When did people start turning on him? When he started doing the marches, when he started taking to the streets, when he started going out and actually galvanizing support and actually surrounding the halls of power and actually causing problems. And then what manifested behind Martin Luther King and during the period of Martin Luther King was a militant like Malcolm X, who I actually think Malcolm X was more in line. He understood. Yeah, they'll just watch you march. They'll let you walk back and forth and march and protest and do all that kind of stuff, and then they'll go back to work and just vote against you, right? That there's a really, really influential and powerful speech that Malcolm X gave called the Ballot or the Bullet, and that I think we all need to listen to and take very seriously, especially during this era of like psychopathic narcissism, this childish idea that we can negotiate with the sun. Like, where we are at a place now where if the ballot is not going to resolve it, well, you can go listen to Malcolm X's speech to get a better understanding of what the solution actually is. Yeah, we get the veneer of human rights, but they kill you if they know they can get away with it and won't get flack. Yeah. I mean, like, I'm really like, just because we have this technology, right? Just because we have new technologies, right, doesn't mean our lives are any goddamn better. Like, I'm over, truly over this idea that capitalism is a superior system to feudalism. I keep asking how. Like, did feudalism manifest World War I and World War II? Like these horrific, like the nuclear bomb, right? Did feudalism manifest these enormous atrocities, like this industrialized genocide machine? Like, I'm sure that there were horrible things. I know, in fact, that there were horrible things that happened under feudalism, obviously. Like, obviously. But capitalism's not much better, and it just seems to me like all capitalism's managed to do is make it even more terrifying. Like, how are we different than medieval peasants? We work harder. That's how we're different than medieval peasants. We work harder, we work longer hours, we get paid less, we have less leisure time, right? There's less security. That at least a medieval peasant, when he's like paying fealty to the king or paying fealty to his lord or the knights or something, there's sort of a tacit understanding that like those are the guys that fight for us, right? Hate capitalism, but like I said, it's preferable to feudalism, chattel slavery, or Nazism. I mean, yeah, like under feudalism, you could. The question is, how do elites maintain control of society? Under feudalism, you could escape and live in the commons, so they used violence. Under capitalism, we are controlled by the dull compulsion of human needs. You need a set of civil rights so you can operate in society. I mean, one of the things that I think this is not the right question. How do elites maintain control of society? Like, the elites don't actually care about maintaining control of society, right? Because they use chaos. Like, chaos is, like, there isn't any order, right? They're actively using disorder in order to confuse the populace and to keep the populace quelled or exhausted. And they're not doing it to maintain control, right? They're doing it so that we work and they don't. Like, that's all. Like, what would a psychopathic, gaslighting narcissist do in order to ensure that they get to sit around and do nothing important at all while everybody else rushes around and does all their work for them? Just create chaos. But I do understand what you're saying. I feel like we're coming to the same point. I'm just frustrated, grinning. I gotta be honest. I'm just fucking mad. I'm just mad as hell. I'm mad as hell and I'm not gonna take it anymore. Like, I just keep having like the dumbest conversations. So you can use your civil rights to enter into a relationship with an elite capitalist. Feudalism didn't need to grant rights. And in my view, it's neither here nor there. Honestly, like, the capitalist model is collapsing back into feudalism, right? As it's failing. All of the quote unquote rights that we have, like, no one gives a shit about these. Like, the American government suspends habeas corpus, right? Like, if they want to pick you up and do stuff to you, they're going to. Like, there's no security in any of this, right? Like, and the idea that, like, capitalism is better because if you don't like this particular feudal lord, you can go sell yourself to another feudal lord. But both of those feudal lords, in fact, have shareholders that are the same guys. So it's just like a new layer. Like, it's just a new layering, right? And that the structure of it is truly not that much different. And that what we mistake for rights are essentially just the ruling class just being like, yeah, do what you want. Yeah, whatever. Like, we don't need to be like too invested in the, yeah, sure, dye your hair pink, sure, be gay, sure, whatever type of person you want to be, like, all, like, sure, well, okay, that all sounds fine by us, like, whatever you say, okay, show up at 9 a.m. though, right? Like, that's it. Like, this is the work that needs to be done, and we expect you to do it. And like, and if you don't, then you don't eat. So I look at this like, what rights? Like, what rights? What's so, like, annoying right now is, like, the fundamental demands of people on the left are actually really easy and simple. Like, really. Like, and shockingly basic. Like, shockingly basic. Like, take a look at the healthcare conversation that's happening in the United States. Like, really think about how backwards a culture needs to be to be having the conversation about the healthcare system that's occurring in the United States. Like, passing a public healthcare option, a nationalized healthcare system, right? Any of this kind of stuff, a single-payer healthcare system, right? Saves the populace money with extremely better outcomes, right? Everyone gets access to healthcare, and it costs everybody less. Across the board, no exceptions. Literally every single person in the United States, with the exception of the parasites, so like 10 guys, would benefit. The doctors and nurses themselves would benefit because they would be put into a system where they would no longer be forced to refuse care, which is something that occurs all of the time in the American healthcare system, right? And like, just these absolutely brutal, brutish, barbaric outcomes. And what is it for? It literally is so like 10 guys can make $1 billion. Like, it's fucking backwards. Yeah. Lacking healthcare is the dull compulsion of human need. If you want healthcare, you have to make money for an elite. Then maybe you get medicine. Yeah, like, I mean, such an idea would be considered like outrageous, and we extend this to food and shelter as well. Like literally, like what are the rights that we have been given? Well, we've been given the right to find our own food and shelter. Well, that's not much of a trade-off when the wage doesn't pay for it in the first place. And then all it's done is it's given the capitalists the excuse they need to make the system as chaotic as possible, to commodify the housing itself, right? So, something that would be considered a complete abhorrence in feudalism, right? Oh, that there are peasants, they work, they get food, they get shelter, obviously, right? Like, even the chattel slaves, even the chattel slavers argued that that the system we currently live under was inferior to chattel slavery for this reason, that the chattel slavers needed to at least clothe and shelter their slaves when there wasn't any work to do. Whereas if there's no work for us to do, we get fucking abandoned, right? We just basically get told to fucking die. And some of us do. So you get forced to work at the point of a spear. You get to starve, be homeless, or die of treatable disease, and that will force you to work. But I mean, under feudal, like, there's not much evidence to show that, like, people are being forced to work at the point of a spear in feudalism. Yeah, if Ford gets reelected, pissed off. How you doing, bud? How you doing, bud? Good to see you, man. I hope you're doing well, man. I saw that you were in straits again. And you're right. If Ford gets reelected, he'll put in a 2-tier healthcare system. Like, he's basically said it. Like, there's no fucking mystery. And that's another reason why I think people are getting soft on Ford. Like, that's psychotic, right? Everyone loses. Everyone loses. Your healthcare system is more expensive. You'll pay more. The outcomes will be worse. right? There's no benefit to doing it. Like literally none whatsoever. And so if you're voting conservative so that they can put in a 2-tier healthcare system, you're a fucking moron. You don't even care about yourself. Like you don't even care about yourself. Like that's how fucking stupid you are. If you're voting for a government that's going to do that shit. Like but I mean, like, we voted for Ford in the first place, so you know what can you do? Look, and I'm not trying to argue that feudalism is good, right? I'm not trying to argue that feudalism is good. I'm just trying to say that capitalism's not much different. Like it's not like we pretend like capitalism is actually this big gigantic step up, that it's been this like huge change in the way that we operate. And oh my goodness, everything is so much different, right? Like it's not that different. Serfs were obliged to live on their lord's land. That's correct. Give them homage, labor, and a share of the produce. Yeah. I mean, but why would they refuse? Like this is the thing, right? Like it's when you look at most feudal societies, there was like an understanding that actually existed between the lords and the serfs, right? There was an understanding that, well, we need an administrator, right? We need somebody who's talking to the outside world, right? We need somebody who's actually doing this kind of stuff, right? It might as well be this guy, right? And this administrator, right? Like, well, he needs food. Like we need to feed this guy, right? We probably should have some kind of military force, right? Like we probably need some kind of police and standing army, like something for the security of the people and all of this, right? Like, does this sound at all familiar? Like, does this sound at all familiar? Like somebody like Justin Trudeau. Like Justin Trudeau's just like a fucking prince, right? He's just like a feudal lord. Right? He's got his daddy's name, and he maintains a police force, right? Like, and the and like the wise ruler is the one who just never gives the serfs a reason to rebel, right? The wise ruler is the one who just kind of makes sure that the serfs were largely pleased. Right? And when you think about, like, this is the reason why, like, medieval serfs, they didn't work that hard. Why? Because their goal was just to grow food. That's what they really were. They were just agrarian, living off the land, like, growing food. Very simple, like fucking hobbits. Like, and like, well, and but the reason it becomes unstable is because the merchant class, right, the merchant and manufacturing class, became wealthier than the aristocracy, and began to buy land from the aristocracy, and with the purchasing of the land came the peasants, right? That the serfs came with the land, and the capitalists weren't happy to just keep the serfs on the land because they had created a new technology, so they only needed like 1/10 of the serfs doing the work. And so what did they do? Well, they forced the women and children into factory work, right, to manufacture shit. And they forced the men onto boats in order to enact an empire, right? Commit genocide, steal a bunch of resources, and, slavery. Just, the typical sort of stuff. That everybody got conscripted is what really happened, right? And that occurs because the merchants and manufacturers begin, the private owner class, begin to have more power and wealth than the monarchs, right? Which is why, like, there are societies that avoid this, and they avoid this by entrenching the merchant and manufacturing class into their monarchical structure. You see a lot of that throughout Middle Eastern politics, right? That it was really well understood that private merchants and private owners can overwhelm established dynasties and established ruling classes, right? Is that something you actually want, right? Like, it makes sense if the ruling class has gone like totally fucking psycho, which definitely has happened. But like, as we see the merchant manufacturing class, the capitalist class, the ownership class, like, they don't care about anything other than that. They're not actually interested in governing or ruling, right? Which they tell you outright, get rid of government. Like, they say it to your face. Like, oh, we should just get rid of government. So they're not interested in governing. They're not interested in rules or law or order or structure or any of that. Systems, none of that. Right? It's just chaos. Like, it's total chaos. Is this better? And like, it's chaos to the degree that the earth itself is rejecting us. Like, is this better? What we're doing? And then the capitalist class, what do? They erect a ruling structure, right? What they call a parliamentary democracy, a representative government. But the representatives don't actually represent the people, they represent the businesses. Like, that's the whole point, is that you're not voting for a representative for yourself. You're voting for the person who's going to go negotiate with the corporations. And then the representative government exists on the behalf of like the Hudson's Bay Company, right? That this is the solution that corporate capitalists came up with to have negotiations with one another. It has nothing to do with our own like personal civil liberty or any of that kind of shit. Like, it's just a way for businesses to talk without having to actually go to war with one another, which they do anyway. But, you know, the idea is that, oh, we've got our representative here, he negotiates. Like, this guy here, like someone like Joe Biden, right? Like, Joe Biden was like Captain Credit Card, right? Like, he was a representative of the credit card companies. Like, and they all knew it. So he kept pushing for legislation to help credit card companies, right? And like, and then the credit card companies become more ubiquitous and they become part of the larger structure. And now suddenly everybody's got a fucking credit card. And I look at credit cards as nothing but a complete and total drain. Just a complete negative. Like, no positive whatsoever. Like, the only positive that exists for credit cards is, oh, I can buy a thing that I couldn't buy before. And yeah, now the whole society collapses because of it. But yeah, you can take your fictitious, non-existent capital that just they keep generating more of, and you can go indebt yourself to a psychopath class so that you can get a faster car quicker. Like, yeah, that definitely exists for sure. All right. Well, on this note, guys, now that I have successfully convinced you that we should return to feudalism, just to reaffirm. I don't want to go back to feudalism. We are going to go back to like, we're already there in my view. Like, we're already back into feudalism. Like, I don't really see how this culture is much different. Like, that's the point that I'm trying to drive towards, right? I'm not trying to say that feudalism is better than capitalism. We should go back to feudalism, right? I'm trying to say that we're in a feudal structure, that the capitalist system is not actually better. That it's a and in some ways it is noticeably worse, right? Like, and I mean, feudalism wasn't a society that was naturally structured to destroy itself, whereas capitalism is. It's completely structured to destroy itself. And what are we going to do? We're going to regress back into feudalism, right? Try to criticize Elon Musk today. The serfs will attack you. Yeah, no kidding, eh? Like, I genuinely do not get the Elon Musk simping. Like, the Elon, like, that's the biggest form of fucking gaslighting. I like, you've really got some Stockholm syndrome if you're simping for a guy like Elon Musk. Like, this guy's an idiot. This guy's like just a daddy's boy. Like when I was talking earlier about how like the conservative mindset is all just daddy, right? That's it. We're just kids that didn't grow up. Well, I think there's just a lot of people who look at Elon Musk and he's just like Daddy Elon, right? That he's their daddy. That's it. Like we're just a society of children looking for a daddy, right? And like this is why Jordan Peterson becomes popular, right? Everybody's looking for a daddy, right? And oh, this daddy says that he loves me, or that you can do it, right? So daddy's got my back, right? Soon you'll pay for your job. Soon the pay for your job will be room and board. That is all. I mean, that's essentially what it is for me, Harry. Like all of the work I do go into room and board. Like every so often I can cobble together enough money in order to get like a little bit something extra. But like that something extra is always just like, you know, okay, so you got a couple hours in the evening to kill. So here's a video game, right? And so kill those 2 hours. Like and it's getting to be that way for most people. Like it's getting to be that way for most people. And like is this something that we like how long are we going to tolerate this? Looks like we're going to tolerate it for a long time. Looks like we're going to tolerate it for a long, long time. All right, guys, on that happy note, we've hit the time. Always remember, guys, always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. The billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hope that you'll never realize it and you'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Revolt, rebel, repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.